Hey guys, tonight we embark on an epic quest, not through ancient ruins or forgotten empires, but into the surprisingly uninspiring, yet utterly pervasive realm of the world's most boring flag. You picture it now, don't you? A vast, featureless expanse. A color so unremarkable it almost defies description. A design so simplistic it makes a child's crayon drawing look like a Renaissance masterpiece. You might even feel a shiver of existential dread. A faint whisper of you probably won't survive this creeping into the cozy corners of your mind. But fear not, for even in the depths of ultimate blandness, there are stories to be found, whispers of human ingenuity, or perhaps the lack thereof that shaped this peculiar symbol. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as you settle in, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself drifting back, not to the dawn of civilization, but to a time when flags were still finding their footing, when the very concept of a national emblem was nascent, a flickering candle in the grand theatre of human identity. Imagine a world where tribal markings were the pinnacle of visual communication, where a splash of ochre on a cave wall was as intricate as it got. Then, almost imperceptibly, a new need emerges. As communities grow, as trade routes stretch like tentative spiderwebs across continents, a simple, undeniable truth becomes clear. You need a way to say, "Hey, that's us!" You're not thinking about artistic merit or striking symbolism. No, you're thinking about practicality. You're thinking about how to spot your hunting party from a mile away, how to distinguish your fishing boat from the next. And so, the very first primitive flag takes shape. It's not a banner waving proudly in the wind, not yet. It's more like a colored stick, a piece of dyed hide, perhaps even a remarkably dull feather tied to a spear. You see the early humans, squinting against the harsh sun, trying to make out who's coming over the hill. "Is that Bob?" you might ask, straining your eyes. And someone else would reply, "No. Bob's stick is definitely more of a beige. That's probably Fred. His stick is always just there." This wasn't about aesthetics. It was about sheer unadulterated utility. Historians still argue whether the earliest flags were truly intentional symbols or merely accidental markers. Like a lost glove in a field becoming a landmark. Was it a deliberate act of design? Or did someone just forget their lunch on a prominent stick? And everyone else thought, hey, that's not a bad idea for distinguishing us. One mainstream historical fact you grasp is that early flags, or vexilloids as some call them, often featured animal totems or simple geometric shapes. Think of the Roman eagle, a powerful, albeit sometimes slightly intimidating symbol. But here, with our boring flag, you're not seeing any majestic beasts or intricate patterns. You're seeing, well, not much. It's a color. Just a color. And it's not even a particularly interesting color. It's the kind of color you'd describe as beige adjacent or wallpaper-esque. You can almost hear the conversation. What color should our flag be? How about something that doesn't offend anyone, or excite anyone, or even register as a distinct visual experience? Brilliant! The perfect representation of our collective indifference. This is where the quirkiness comes in. You learn that in some obscure, forgotten culture, the color of their flag was determined by the most readily available and cheapest pigment. So if mud was abundant, mud-colored it was. If dried camel dung was the easiest thing to come by, then prepare for the most singularly unappealing national emblem imaginable. You chuckle to yourself, imagining the pride of a nation rallied behind a banner the color of well-trodden earth. For the beige, they would cry, their voices lacking any real conviction. The debate among scholars rages on. Was the sheer blandness of this foundational flag a stroke of genius, a deliberate choice to foster unity by avoiding any potentially divisive imagery? Or was it simply the ultimate act of creative exhaustion? A surrender to the inevitable truth that some things are just meant to be boring. You can almost picture the flag committee meeting, right? Team, we need a flag. Something that screams nation without actually saying anything. Ideas. A long silence follows, punctuated only by the distant chirping of crickets and the occasional yawn. Then someone, perhaps the most pragmatic or tired person in the room, pipes up, "How about just a single solid color?" A murmur of approval, not of excitement, but of weary resignation, sweeps through the room. "Yes! Perfect! No arguments about lions or dragons! No debates about stripes versus stars! Just color." And thus, the template for the world's most boring flag was set. You feel a gentle wave of drowsiness wash over you as you contemplate the sheer lack of ambition. It's almost comforting in its simplicity. No grand narratives, no heroic deeds emblazoned upon its surface, just a quiet, unassuming presence. It's the kind of flag you'd accidentally use as a cleaning rag, only to realize your mistake hours later, if at all. You imagine a flag maker, back in the day, diligently working on this masterpiece of mediocrity. "Is it boring enough?" they'd ask, holding up the fabric, squinting. Could it be more boring? And their apprentice, a wide-eyed idealist, would probably reply, "But master, where's the passion, the glory, the interest?" The master would simply sigh, pat the apprentice on the shoulder, and say, "Son, some things are just meant to be boring. Embrace it. It's cheaper that way." The early adopters of this concept, you realize, weren't necessarily looking to be revolutionary. They were looking to be functional. They were the pioneers of good enough. You see a merchant ship, a tiny speck on the vast ocean, flying this monochromatic banner. It's not meant to inspire fear in enemies or awe in allies. It's simply meant to say, we are a ship. We are from a place. And we are probably carrying something moderately interesting, but not so interesting that it requires a flashy flag. You can almost hear the ship's captain shouting orders, "Hoist the flag! The one that looks like a faded pillowcase!" And the crew, equally uninspired, would dutifully comply, perhaps stifling a yawn as they did so. This brings you to another mainstream historical fact: the widespread adoption of simple, solid-colored flags by various minor kingdoms and duchies throughout history. They weren't powerful enough to commission elaborate designs, nor did they have the artistic flair to do so. Their priorities were survival, trade, and perhaps a decent harvest. A flag was a necessity, not a luxury, so they opted for the path of least resistance. And you can't really blame them. If your kingdom is constantly under threat from a larger, more aggressive neighbor, are you really going to spend your precious resources on a flag that boasts a golden eagle riding a unicorn while juggling flaming swords? No, you're going to pick the cheapest fabric and the most available dye. You're going to pick the color that says, "We exist. Please don't invade us. We're not worth the trouble, honestly." The quirky tidbit here is that in some forgotten historical texts, there's mention of an emperor who, upon seeing his kingdom's newly designed solid-colored flag, reportedly declared, "It's so utterly unremarkable, it's brilliant. No one will ever confuse us with anyone else, because no one will ever remember us." Whether this was a moment of profound cynicism or a genuine, albeit twisted, philosophical insight, remains a subject of historical debate. But you can imagine the court artists sweating profusely, trying to explain the artistic merits of a single, uniform hue. But Your Majesty, the subtle interplay of light on the fabric creates a mesmerizing void. They might stammer, hoping to impress. The emperor would probably just nod slowly, perhaps falling asleep in his throne. The scholarly debate, you realize, often centers on the semiotics of nothingness. Can a flag, by its very lack of distinguishing features, become a powerful statement in itself? Does its blandness somehow elevate it to a meta level of symbolism, representing all and nothing simultaneously? Or is it simply undeniably boring? You can almost hear the university professors, locked in passionate, yet incredibly dull, arguments about the philosophical implications of a single color flag. It's a testament to the minimalist aesthetic, one would argue, adjusting their tweed jacket. No, my dear colleague. It's a profound commentary on the inherent meaninglessness of national identity, another would retort, adjusting their spectacles. And you, drifting in and out of consciousness, can only think it's just beige. The jokes you find emerge naturally from this ocean of blandness. Why did the boring flag go to therapy? Because it had no distinguishing features and felt utterly unremarkable. What do you call a flag that puts you to sleep? A border. And finally, what's the boring flag's favorite song? The sound of silence, obviously. These little moments of levity are like tiny, bright buoys on the vast, calm sea of the narrative, helping you stay afloat, even as the gentle tide of sleep pulls at you. You imagine the people living under this flag, their lives probably as uneventful and predictable as the flag itself. No dramatic revolutions, no grand conquests. Just a steady, unwavering march towards, well, tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that, all under the watchful, yet completely indifferent eye of their yen-inspired national banner. You continue your journey through the history of this flag, a journey that feels less like an epic adventure and more like a leisurely stroll through a particularly beige art gallery. As the centuries turn, you notice a subtle, almost imperceptible shift in its story. This isn't a flag that inspires great movements or fuels passionate speeches. Instead, it becomes a quiet constant, a backdrop against which the more dramatic narratives of history unfold. You see it fluttering gently over the gates of a medieval town, perhaps a small, unassuming principality tucked away in a valley. Its very lack of distinctiveness, ironically, becomes its strength. No one feels threatened by it. No one feels particularly inspired by it either. But that's a small price to pay for not being invaded. You observe a mainstream historical fact: many smaller, neutral nations in Europe, particularly during periods of intense conflict, adopted flags that were intentionally simple and unprovocative. Think of the early Swiss cantons, often opting for plain crosses or unadorned fields. They weren't trying to make a statement. They were trying to stay out of trouble. Our boring flag fits right into this pattern, a masterclass in visual diplomacy through sheer forgettability. The quirky tidbit that emerges here is the tale of a specific historical figure, a minor baron from a forgotten land, who was said to have chosen this particular bland flag for his dominion because he suffered from an extreme case of vexillophobia, the fear of flags. Not just any flags, mind you, but interesting flags. Flags with bold colors, intricate crests, or even just a single dynamic line would send him into a panic. So his solution was to commission a flag so devoid of visual stimulation that it wouldn't trigger his debilitating anxiety. You picture him, pale and trembling, approving the final design. Yes, perfect. It's almost nothing. It barely registers. Excellent work, Taylor. You've saved my sanity, and probably my kingdom, from my own personal terror. The court, of course, was utterly baffled, but too afraid of the Baron's unpredictable fits to question his rather unusual aesthetic preferences. The scholarly debate surrounding this period focuses on whether this deliberate blandness was a form of geopolitical strategy, or merely a symptom of profound national apathy. Did these nations actively decide to be uninteresting to external powers, or were they just inherently uninteresting? And their flags simply reflected that innate quality. You can almost hear the academic arguments echoing through the hushed halls of ancient libraries. "It was a shrewd calculation," one historian might exclaim, slamming a dusty tome. A subtle nod to non-aggression. "A visual promise of neutrality." Another would sigh dramatically, adjusting their spectacles. Nonsense, my dear fellow. It was simply the path of least resistance for people who couldn't be bothered to pick a second color. The truth, you suspect, lies somewhere in the murky middle, a blend of pragmatic caution and a healthy dose of why bother. A light joke ripples through your mind. Why was the boring flag always invited to parties? Because it never caused a scene. You also ponder. What did the boring flag say when it met an exciting flag? Oh, you're busy. And finally, what's the boring flag's favorite type of music? Elevator music, of course. These little mental diversions help to break up the gentle monotony, like tiny ripples on a calm pond. You envision the people under this flag, leading lives that are, by all accounts, quite comfortable, if a little predictable. Their conversations wouldn't revolve around dramatic tales of conquest or vibrant cultural achievements. Instead, they'd discuss the price of grain, the weather, and perhaps the alarming excitement of a new shade of slightly less boring brown being introduced in the local dye shop. You see the flag evolve, not through grand design changes, but through minute, almost microscopic variations. Perhaps the shade of beige darkens ever so slightly with age, or a subtle, barely perceptible weave pattern emerges as textile technology advances. It's the kind of evolution you'd only notice if you were truly paying attention, and even then, you'd probably second-guess yourself. Did that flag always have that slight fleck of off-white? You might ask, peering closer. And the answer would likely be perhaps. I'm not entirely sure I've ever really looked at it. This continuity, this unwavering commitment to the unremarkable, is a testament to its enduring legacy. It's the flag that just is. You observe a mainstream historical fact about the practicalities of flag production in this era. The cost of dyes and skilled labor was a significant factor in flag design. Vibrant colors were often expensive to produce and maintain, as they faded quickly in the sun. Complex designs required highly trained artisans, so a simple, solid color, especially one derived from readily available natural pigments, was the economically sensible choice. It was the budget flag, the sensible sedan of national symbols. And you can almost hear the treasurer of a small kingdom back then. Excellent.
No fancy embellishments.
No expensive red or blue. Just good, honest, dirt cheap off-white. Our treasury will thank you, and our textile workers will thank you for not giving them carpal tunnel from all those intricate stitches. The quirky tidbit you uncover here is about a specific guild of flag makers, renowned not for their artistic prowess, but for their incredible efficiency in producing vast quantities of this particularly dull flag. They were known as the masters of the monotone. Their workshops were reportedly silent, save for the rhythmic thud of their looms, and the occasional sigh of existential ennui. They perfected the art of the perfect, unblemished single-color field, their pride not in beauty, but in utter uniformity. Legend has it they once held a competition to see who could create the most perfectly indistinguishable flag from their previous batch. The winner, a stoic old man named Bartholomew, was said to have shed a single tear of joy, a tear that, you imagine, was probably the same dull shade as his masterpiece. The scholarly debate, rather humorously, delves into the psychological impact of such a flag on its citizens. Did living under a consistently boring flag foster a sense of stability and calm? Or did it subtly contribute to a pervasive sense of apathy and lack of ambition? Did it produce a populace that valued predictability above all else? Or did it merely reflect an already existing national character of quiet stoicism? You picture earnest academics poring over old diaries and letters, searching for clues. Citizen A seems perfectly content with the flag, one might note. But Citizen B writes of a gnawing emptiness he can't quite identify. Could it be the flag? The conclusion inevitably remains elusive, shrouded in the mists of psychological nuance. You find yourself chuckling at another joke. Why did the boring flag break up with the exciting flag because it said they had no chemistry. What do you call a flag that's always falling asleep? A droopy banner. And finally, why did the boring flag get sent to its room? Because it was being too plain. These little humorous interludes are surprisingly refreshing. Like a tiny splash of color in a monochromatic world, you sense a peculiar comfort in the blandness, a reassuring consistency that, paradoxically, makes it stand out in its own unique way. It's the quiet child in the boisterous classroom, the wallflower at the vibrant party. It doesn't demand attention, but its very lack of demand makes you notice it, even if just for a fleeting moment. As you drift deeper into the narrative, you understand that this flag is more than just fabric and dye. It's a symbol of quiet resilience, of a refusal to engage in the flashy theatrics of other nations. It's the flag that says we're here, we're doing our thing, and honestly, we'd rather not talk about it. You imagine the reactions of foreign dignitaries visiting a country flying this flag. They'd probably be polite, perhaps even a little bewildered. A lovely flag, they might say, trying to sound enthusiastic, so unburdened by anything. And the local officials would nod gravely, sensing the unspoken judgment, yet secretly proud of their flag's steadfast commitment to the unadorned. It's a flag that doesn't try too hard, and in a world obsessed with trying too hard, there's a certain quiet dignity in that. The timeline flows onward, carrying you into an era where the world begins to shrink, where global trade and communication accelerate, and yet, our boring flag persists, a steadfast anchor in a sea of increasingly vibrant and complex national symbols. You notice a mainstream historical fact. The age of exploration brought with it a proliferation of flags, as new territories were claimed and new trading empires emerged. Each explorer, each trading company, each nascent colonial power sought to plant its own distinctive banner. Think of the intricate designs of the East India Company flags or the various imperial standards. Yet, amidst this explosion of heraldry, our dull flag maintained its unwavering simplicity. It wasn't a flag of conquest, it was a flag of quiet existence, of nations that simply wanted to be left alone to cultivate their turnips. You see it flutter on some forgotten outpost, not claiming territory, but merely indicating that someone, somewhere, had decided to set up a small, unremarkable settlement there. The quirky tidbit that emerges from this period is the story of a particularly adventurous explorer, a man known for his daring feats and his penchant for mapping uncharted territories. He always carried with him a small, plain flag, identical to our boring flag, which he would plant at every new discovery, not as a claim of ownership, but as a personal marker, a quiet testament to his presence. When asked why he didn't use a more impressive banner, he would simply shrug and say, "Because this one never gets tangled in the rigging, and frankly, it blends in. Less chance of being noticed by angry natives or rival explorers." His pragmatism, born out of a desire for efficiency and a touch of paranoia, led to the ironic situation where a flag designed for obscurity became a symbol of widespread, albeit understated, discovery. You can imagine him, after a long, arduous journey, pulling out his boring flag and carefully planting it in the ground, a sigh of quiet satisfaction escaping his lips. "Another day, another discovery," he'd mutter, and not a single frill in sight. The scholarly debate often centers on the subtle psychological impact of this flag on other nations during this period. Did its plainness make it seem less threatening, fostering a sense of peaceful coexistence? Or did it, conversely, inspire a dismissive attitude, leading more powerful nations to view the entities flying it as insignificant and thus ripe for exploitation? You picture academics poring over diplomatic correspondence, searching for any mention, however fleeting, of this flag. The ambassador from the land of the unremarkable flag seemed quite polite, one document might read, but also rather forgettable. The ambiguity of its impression, you realize, is a defining characteristic of its history. It's the flag that doesn't demand a strong reaction, only a faint, polite nod of acknowledgement, quickly followed by a thought of something else. A light joke surfaces. Why did the boring flag never get invited to the flag parade? Because it always blended into the background. Another one. What do you call a boring flag with a secret identity? Plain Jane. And finally, why did the boring flag bring a ladder to the party? Because it wanted to elevate its blandness. These little moments of amusement are like small, refreshing sips of water in a vast, dry desert. You find a strange comfort in the flag's steadfast refusal to conform to the prevailing trends of grandiosity. It's the rebel who rebels by being utterly, unapologetically unrebellious. You witness the flag's journey through various geopolitical shifts. Empires rise and fall, borders are redrawn with alarming frequency, and yet, in some small, overlooked corner of the world, our boring flag continues to wave. It's often adopted by newly formed states that emerge from the ashes of larger conflicts. States so exhausted by the struggle that they simply cannot muster the energy for a grand flag design. They just need something to put on a pole. So, they reach for the easiest, most unproblematic option. We need a flag, the provisional government might declare, rubbing their temples. Something simple. No eagles, no lions, definitely no flaming swords, just a colour. Any colour, really, as long as it's not too bright. And thus, the legacy of blandness continues, passed down through generations of wary bureaucrats. You recall a mainstream historical fact about the rise of international law and diplomacy in the 17th and 18th centuries. Flags became crucial for identifying ships and distinguishing friend from foe on the high seas. Even in this context, the boring flag served its purpose. While it might not have inspired fear in pirates, it at least clearly indicated this is a vessel. It is not trying to trick you with elaborate false colours. It is just here. Its very honesty, its utter lack of pretense, might have even given it a strange advantage. Who would bother plundering a ship flying a flag that literally screams nothing interesting here? The quirky tidbit here involves an incident during a naval battle, where a ship flying our boring flag was reportedly mistaken for a fog bank by an enemy vessel, leading to its accidental evasion of conflict. The captain, a notoriously unexcitable man, merely noted in his logbook, "Enemy failed to engage. Visibility poor. Our flag, as always, proved exquisitely indistinct." This accidental strategic advantage, born purely out of its visual mediocrity, is a testament to the unforeseen benefits of being consistently forgettable. You imagine the enemy captain, squinting through the mist. Is that a ship, or just a patch of slightly darker fog? The answer, of course, was neither exciting nor alarming. The scholarly debate often explores the concept of negative signaling in international relations. Did the boring flag, by its very lack of strong signals, effectively communicate a desire for non-interference and peaceful neutrality? Or did it, paradoxically, make the nations flying it seem more vulnerable to aggressive neighbours, as if they were too weak or uncommitted to even design a proper flag? You can almost hear the academic arguments, meticulously dissecting the nuances of visual communication in a pre-modern world.
The absence of imagery is the message,
one might argue passionately. No, my dear, the absence of imagery is merely the absence of imagery. Another would counter, equally passionately, but perhaps with less dramatic flair. You find yourself smiling at yet another joke. Why did the boring flag refuse to go to the party? Because it heard it was going to be too colourful. What's the boring flag's favourite pastime? Blending in. And finally, why did the boring flag never get a promotion? Because it lacked any distinguishing features. These moments of quiet humour provide a gentle rhythm, like the soft lapping of waves on a calm shore. You sense a strange sense of comfort in the flag's understated presence. It's the kind of comfort you find in an old, worn-out blanket. not because it's beautiful, but because it's familiar, dependable, and entirely without surprises. As you drift deeper into the narrative, you start to appreciate the subtle defiance in its blandness. In a world constantly striving for attention, for impact, for memorable moments, this flag stands as a quiet counterpoint, a symbol of quiet resistance against the tyranny of flash and spectacle. It's the anti-flag, the flag that says, you don't need to be loud to exist. And in its unwavering commitment to being unremarkable, it becomes, in its own peculiar way, remarkably enduring. It's the flag that just keeps on keeping on, like a reliable old clock, ticking away the seconds, unnoticed but ever present. Your journey through time with the boring flag continues, moving now into the age of revolutions and industrialization, a period of immense upheaval and dramatic change. Yet, even as nations fractured and reformed, as new ideologies swept across continents, our boring flag maintained its quiet, unassuming presence. You note a mainstream historical fact. The late 18th and 19th centuries saw a surge in nationalistic fervor, often expressed through elaborate and highly symbolic flags. Think of the French tricolour, the American stars and stripes, or the countless banners of newly independent states, all screaming their identity and aspirations. But our flag, it simply remained itself, a steadfast monument to unremarkability. You picture it flying over a small, unaligned territory, perhaps a valley nestled between warring empires, its very blandness a plea for peace, a visual declaration of we want no part of your drama. The quirky tidbit that surfaces from this turbulent era is the curious case of a revolutionary group that, in a desperate attempt to appear non-threatening, and thus avoid attracting the attention of powerful monarchies, deliberately adopted a flag identical to our boring flag. Their manifesto, discovered years later, reportedly stated, "Our flag shall be so utterly devoid of provocative imagery that even the most paranoid despot will mistake us for a particularly drab laundry day. We shall conquer not with fire and sword, but with supreme visual apathy." This strategy, surprisingly, met with some success. Their movements were often overlooked, their gatherings mistaken for unusually quiet farming conventions. You imagine the leader, addressing his devoted followers, "Comrades! Today, we raise the banner of not much, really. But in its sheer uninspiring quality lies our ultimate strength." The scholarly debate often centers on the efficacy of stealth vexillology, the art of designing flags to avoid detection or provoke minimal reaction. Was this revolutionary group's choice a brilliant, calculated move of strategic camouflage, or merely a happy accident born of a lack of artistic talent within their ranks? You picture historians engaged in lively debates, poring over grainy photographs and faded documents. "They understood the power of understatement," one might declare, tapping their finger on a map. "Or they just ran out of red dye," another would retort, stifling a laugh. The answer, as always, remains a delightful shade of ambiguous. Like the flag itself, a light joke comes to mind. Why did the boring flag refuse to play hide and seek? Because it knew it would never be found. Another one, what's the boring flag's favorite emoji? The grey square. And finally, why did the boring flag get detention? Because it was caught being too plain in class. These little humorous diversions are like gentle breezes, rustling the leaves of your consciousness and keeping you from drifting too far into the peaceful slumber that the flag itself seems to embody. You appreciate its unwavering commitment to being, well, unwavering. You observe the flag's quiet presence during the massive shifts in trade and industry. As goods moved across the globe with unprecedented speed, flags became even more crucial for identifying the origin and ownership of vessels. Our boring flag, despite its lack of flair, still served its purpose on the docks of burgeoning industrial ports. It wasn't the flag of a major trading power, but perhaps a reliable, albeit unexciting, supplier of raw materials. You see it fluttering above a cargo ship laden with something entirely unglamorous, like coal or timber. It's the flag of dependability, not dazzle. It's the flag that says we deliver on time, even if our flag looks like it was designed by a committee of tired accountants. A mainstream historical fact you absorb is the growing importance of international conventions and regulations concerning flags during this period. As global commerce expanded, standardized flag signals and recognition became essential for maritime safety and diplomatic protocols. Even the most boring flag had to adhere to certain basic specifications, like size ratios and material quality. It was a testament to its integration into the wider world, even if it refused to embrace any of its visual exuberance. It was a fully compliant boring flag, meeting all the necessary requirements for official dullness. The quirky tidbit from this era describes a diplomatic incident where a newly appointed ambassador, upon seeing the boring flag for the first time, reportedly burst into tears of disappointment, having expected a much more dramatic national emblem. "Is that all there is?" she reportedly sobbed. "No crest, no motto, no pointy bits." The local officials, utterly perplexed by her emotional outburst, tried to explain the flag's subtle virtues of neutrality and economic efficiency, but she remained inconsolable. You imagine the frantic dispatches sent back to her home country ambassador in distress. "Report severe vexillological trauma." Suggest sending a comfort animal, preferably a very colorful one. The scholarly debate here humorously explores the concept of vexillological expectation and its cultural impact. Did the consistent blandness of this flag reset the expectations of those who encountered it? Or did it merely confirm pre-existing stereotypes about the nation flying it? Was it an intentional subversion of visual norms, or just a reflection of cultural modesty? You picture academics with perfectly combed hair and pristine suits, debating the psychological nuances of disappointment triggered by a flag's lack of visual pizzazz. "It's a Rorschach test for national character," one might declare, adjusting their tie. "No, it's just a blank canvas for projected boredom," another would counter, perhaps stifling a yawn of their own. Another gentle joke drifts into your mind. What did the boring flag say to the artist? Could you just keep it simple? Why did the boring flag get a reputation for being reliable? Because it never changed its colors. And finally, what's the boring flag's favorite snack? Plain crackers, of course. These light-hearted moments are like subtle bursts of flavor in a surprisingly palatable, if not exciting, dish. You find yourself appreciating the flag's refusal to succumb to the pressures of an increasingly visually stimulating world. It's the quiet minimalist in a room full of maximalists, content in its own unadorned skin. As you continue to drift, you realize that the boring flag story is not one of grand triumphs or epic struggles, but of quiet endurance, of a steady, unwavering presence amidst the ebb and flow of history. It's the flag that doesn't need to shout its identity, because its identity is so fundamentally ingrained in its very simplicity. It's the flag that says, we've been here, we'll be here, and we'll probably look exactly the same the whole time. And in that quiet, unwavering consistency, there's a peculiar kind of strength, a soothing predictability that lulls you deeper into a peaceful, dreamlike state. You glide into the 20th century, a period marked by global conflicts, rapid technological advancements, and the rise of mass media. Yet, even as propaganda and advertising flooded the world with vivid imagery, our boring flag remained a steadfast sentinel of subtlety. You note a mainstream historical fact: the two world wars saw flags take on enormous significance, rallying soldiers, marking territories, and symbolizing national resolve. Every nation's banner became a powerful emblem of identity and purpose. Yet, amidst the dramatic unfurling of these charged symbols, our dull flag continued its quiet existence, often associated with neutral zones or humanitarian efforts, places where bold statements were deliberately avoided. You picture it fluttering above a Red Cross tent, a beacon of bland neutrality in a world gone mad. The quirky tidbit that emerges from this era is the anecdote of a particularly zealous propagandist who, attempting to create a powerful recruitment poster for a nation flying our boring flag, found himself in a profound creative crisis. He tried everything, adding a majestic animal, a stirring motto, even just a dynamic angle. Nothing worked. The flag stubbornly resisted any attempt to make it exciting. He eventually gave up, producing a poster that simply read, "Join the army. We have a flag." The irony, of course, was that this understated approach, born of exasperation, accidentally conveyed a sense of humble honesty that resonated with some recruits more than any bombastic imagery could have. You imagine him tearing his hair out, muttering, "It's impossible! It's like trying to make beige pop!" The scholarly debate surrounding this period often focuses on the flag's role in conveying neutrality. Did its inherent blandness genuinely signal a lack of aggression and a desire for peace, or was it merely a visual reflection of a nation's inability to project power on the global stage? You picture international relations scholars poring over old treaties and diplomatic cables, searching for clues. The boring flag in its very void offered a space for common ground, one might argue passionately, or it simply represented a nation that was too small to have an opinion. Another would retort, perhaps with a dry chuckle. The true intent, as always, remains delightfully elusive, shrouded in the gentle mists of political nuance. A light joke surfaces in your mind. Why did the boring flag refuse to join the debate team? Because it had no strong opinions. Another one. What's the boring flag's favorite weather? Overcast. And finally, why did the boring flag get confused for a white surrender flag? Because sometimes its color was just that indistinct. These little moments of amusement are like tiny, refreshing sips of tea, preventing you from drifting too far into the gentle sway of the narrative. You appreciate its quiet strength, its unwavering commitment to being consistently unexciting. You observe the flag's enduring presence as the world moved into the Cold War era, a time of intense ideological struggle and proxy conflicts. While the superpowers flaunted their vibrant, ideologically charged flags, our boring flag continued to represent nations that, for whatever reason, chose to remain non-aligned or simply lacked the geopolitical clout to take a definitive stance. It became the flag of the third way, the quiet corner of the globe that simply wanted to avoid being drawn into the grand ideological battles. You see it flying over a small, unaligned nation, carefully navigating the treacherous waters of Cold War politics, its blandness a protective shield. A mainstream historical fact you grasp is the significant increase in international organizations and peacekeeping missions during this period. Flags of these organizations often opted for simpler, more neutral designs to symbolize their impartial roles. The United Nations flag, with its blue field and olive branches, is a prime example. Our boring flag, in its own way, predated and paralleled this trend, embodying a similar spirit of neutrality and non-aggression, albeit on a national scale. It was the original no-drama flag, consistently demonstrating its commitment to being a quiet participant rather than a loud contender. The quirky tidbit that emerges from this era is the tale of a particular intelligence agency that, during a covert operation, used a replica of our boring flag as a decoy. They reasoned that no one would pay any attention to such an utterly unremarkable banner, allowing their agents to slip in and out unnoticed. The plan reportedly worked flawlessly, with enemy surveillance mistaking the flag for some laundry drying or just a bit of wall. You imagine the intelligence officers congratulating themselves brilliant. Who knew boredom could be such a powerful weapon? The scholarly debate here revolves around the concept of camouflage by neutrality. Did the flag's blandness genuinely make the nations flying it less of a target, or did it simply make them invisible? thus more susceptible to subtle forms of manipulation or exploitation by larger powers. You picture academics hunched over their desks, their minds grappling with the paradox of visibility and invisibility in international relations.
It was a cloak of quiet diplomacy.
One might assert, tapping their pen.
No, it was simply a blanket of benign neglect.
Another would counter, perhaps with a weary sigh. The truth, as always, remains obscured by the very blandness it seeks to explain. You find yourself smiling at another joke. Why did the boring flag never get into trouble? Because it always kept a low profile. What's the boring flag's favorite reality show? Anything without drama. And finally, why did the boring flag always get lost in a crowd? Because it refused to stand out. These quiet moments of humor are like gentle nudges, preventing you from drifting too deeply into the comforting embrace of the narrative. You appreciate the flag's unwavering commitment to its core identity, its steadfast refusal to embrace the fleeting trends of the times. It's the constant, quiet hum in a world of jarring noises. As you drift deeper into the narrative, you sense a profound lesson emerging from the story of this flag. It's a lesson about the power of quiet presence, of the enduring strength found not in flashy displays or loud declarations, but in consistent, unpretentious existence. It's the flag that reminds you that sometimes the most powerful statement you can make is no statement at all. And in that profound simplicity, there's a beauty, a calming influence that wraps around you, inviting you to simply be. It's the flag that helps you find your own quiet center, preparing you for a night of deep, peaceful slumber. You now find yourself in the late 20th century, a period of unprecedented globalization, digital revolution, and the rise of interconnectedness. Yet even as the world became a vast, bustling network, our boring flag continued its quiet journey, a steadfast beacon of unpretentious existence. You note a mainstream historical fact. The end of the Cold War and the subsequent rise of new nations and alliances led to another wave of flag creation, often reflecting new geopolitical alignments or a renewed sense of national identity. Think of the complex designs emerging from the former Soviet bloc, or the flags of burgeoning regional organizations. Yet, amidst this new flurry of symbolic expression, our dull flag remained, a quiet testament to its enduring legacy of simplicity. You picture it gracing the podium at an international conference, not dominating the visual field, but simply being there, a quiet counterpoint to the more flamboyant banners. The quirky tidbit that emerges from this era is the peculiar fascination that graphic designers and vexillologists developed for our boring flag. In an age saturated with over-designed logos and busy interfaces, its sheer simplicity became a topic of academic and artistic discussion. Conferences were held, papers were written, all dissecting the aesthetic and psychological implications of a flag so utterly devoid of distinguishing features. Some argued it was the ultimate minimalist masterpiece. Others, a horrifying testament to human creative bankruptcy. You imagine a high-minded design critic, stroking their chin thoughtfully.
Ah, the profound negative space! The eloquent silence of its hue!
It speaks volumes by saying absolutely nothing at all. The scholarly debate often centers on the flag's digital footprint. In an increasingly visual and digital world, how did a flag designed for utter analog blandness translate into the digital realm? Did it become even more invisible, a mere pixelated blur? Or did its very unremarkableness make it strangely distinctive in a sea of high-resolution complexity? You picture digital vexillologists debating the hexadecimal codes and rendering algorithms of this flag.
Its anti-aliasing is exquisite in its non-committal quality,
one might declare, tapping on a tablet. No, its digital presence merely exacerbates its fundamental lack of data, another would counter, perhaps with a wary shake of their head. The truth, as always, remains delightfully in the grey area, like the flag itself. A light joke drifts into your mind. Why did the boring flag never get caught downloading copyrighted material, because it was too plain to be interesting. Another one, what's the boring flag's favorite social media platform? LinkedIn, for its professional, no-frills aesthetic. And finally, why did the boring flag go to therapy? Because it felt completely unfathomable. These little moments of amusement are like gentle flickers of light in a dim room, keeping you gently engaged as the narrative unfurls. You appreciate its unwavering commitment to its identity, its steadfast refusal to join the visual arms race of the digital age. You observe the flag's quiet journey through the dawn of the internet age. While other nations frantically created flashy websites and digital emblems, the nations flying our boring flag approached the digital frontier with the same understated caution they applied to everything else. Their online presence was often just as minimalist, featuring plain backgrounds and functional, no-nonsense layouts. Their flags, when rendered online, were simply there, a quiet pixelated block in a world of animated GIFs and vibrant banners. You see it as an icon in a web browser, small, unassuming, and utterly unmemorable, yet consistently present. A mainstream historical fact you absorb is the increasing importance of flag identification in global sporting events and international forums. As the world came together for events like the Olympics and various summits, flag recognition became crucial for displays of national pride and unity. Even our boring flag found its place among the vibrant tapestry of national symbols, usually near the bottom of alphabetical lists, quietly awaiting its turn, neither celebrated nor scorned, simply acknowledged. It was the quiet participant, the diligent attendee, neither winning medals nor causing a stir, just reliably present. The quirky tidbit from this era recounts the unexpected trend among some rebellious youth in nations flying our boring flag. In an ironic twist, they began to embrace the flag's blandness as a symbol of anti-consumerism and anti-establishmentarianism. They wore plain, unadorned clothing and deliberately sought out dull, functional objects, viewing their flag as the ultimate statement against the excesses of modern visual culture. You imagine them, perhaps sipping lukewarm tea, explaining to bewildered elders, "It's not boring, grandfather, it's post-aesthetic! It's a protest against the tyranny of visual stimulation!" The elders, of course, would simply nod slowly, perhaps thinking kids these days, always trying to make boring things sound exciting. The scholarly debate here humorously delves into the concept of unintentional counterculture. Did the flag's inherent blandness accidentally foster a subculture of aesthetic nihilism? Or was it merely co-opted by a generation searching for unique ways to express their disillusionment? You picture cultural theorists, their rooms overflowing with obscure art books and vintage vinyl, discussing the semiotics of intentional boringness. It's a deliberate deconstruction of the visual signifier, one might exclaim, gesturing wildly. No, it's just a bunch of teenagers who are bored, another would sigh, perhaps adjusting their vintage spectacles. The truth, as always, remains gloriously, boringly unclear. You find yourself smiling at another joke. Why did the boring flag get kicked out of the art gallery? Because it was too abstract. What's the boring flag's favorite game show? The Price is Right for its practical, unflashy prizes. And finally, why did the boring flag never get lost? Because it always followed the most direct, least interesting path. These moments of quiet humor are like small, steady breaths, keeping you grounded as you gently drift. You appreciate the flag's unwavering commitment to its core identity, its steadfast refusal to be anything other than what it is beautifully, unpretentiously plain. As you continue to drift, you begin to see the boring flag not as a symbol of deficiency, but as a profound statement of self-acceptance. It doesn't aspire to be anything it's not. It doesn't try to impress. It simply exists, a quiet, unwavering presence in a world that constantly demands attention. It's the flag that reminds you that sometimes the greatest strength lies in quiet confidence, in the serene knowledge of who you are, even if who you are is exceptionally unremarkable, and in that realization, a deep sense of calm washes over you, inviting you to embrace the soothing comfort of simplicity and prepare for a night of peaceful, dreamless sleep. You gently float into the 21st century, an age defined by hyper-connectivity, instant gratification, and an almost insatiable hunger for novelty. Yet, despite the constant barrage of digital dazzle and ever-evolving trends, our boring flag endures, a quiet testament to the timeless appeal of utter unremarkability. You note a mainstream historical fact. The early 2000s saw a renewed interest in national identity, often expressed through redesigned flags or the reinterpretation of existing symbols, sometimes with more vibrant colors or modern graphic elements. Think of the debates around national logos and brand identities. Yet, our dull flag remained untouched by these winds of change, its steadfast simplicity an anomaly in a world obsessed with constant reinvention. You see it, perhaps on the screen of a news broadcast, a fleeting background element, quickly forgotten as the eye searches for more visually stimulating content. The quirky tidbit that emerges from this modern era is the surprising popularity of the boring flag among certain online communities dedicated to anti-design or vaporwave aesthetics. For them, its profound blandness became a sort of ironic masterpiece, a deliberate rejection of corporate slickness and an embrace of the aesthetically mundane. They would create digital art featuring the flag, deliberately pixelated or distorted, celebrating its inherent lack of visual interest as a form of high conceptual art. You imagine these digital artists hunched over their keyboards, passionately discussing the philosophical implications of a single, solid color.
It's the ultimate meme of monotony,
one might declare, tapping their finger on a trackpad. Its sheer pointlessness is its profoundest statement. Another would affirm, perhaps with a knowing, ironic smirk. The scholarly debate often centers on the flag's cultural relevance in a globalized, visually driven world. Does its lack of distinguishing features make it truly universal? A symbol that transcends cultural boundaries precisely because it says nothing specific? Or does it merely condemn the nation flying it to perpetual obscurity on the world stage? You picture cultural anthropologists, meticulously analyzing online forums and social media trends, trying to decipher the true meaning of boredom in the digital age. It's a canvas for projection,
a tabula rasa for the global consciousness,
one might argue, gesturing expansively. No, it's just a flag that's not good at being a flag, another would counter, perhaps with a wary sigh, wishing for a more exciting research topic. The answer, as always, remains delightfully inconclusive, as indistinct as the flag itself. A light joke floats into your mind. Why did the boring flag get an honorary degree? Because it was outstanding in its field of being plain. Another one. What's the boring flag's favorite app? Any app with a minimalist interface. And finally, why did the boring flag never complain? Because it was too unremarkable to notice. These little moments of amusement are like gentle ripples in a calm lake, keeping you gently engaged as the narrative continues its serene flow. You appreciate its unwavering commitment to its core identity, its steadfast refusal to be anything other than its beautifully, unpretentiously simple self. You observe the flag's quiet presence in the era of social media and viral content. While other nations' flags were being shared, remixed, and turned into viral memes, our boring flag simply existed, largely unnoticed, an anonymous digital block in the vast sea of visual information. It never went viral, never sparked outrage, and certainly never inspired a dance craze. And perhaps you realize that was its greatest strength, its utter imperviousness to the fleeting whims of online trends. It was the quiet, dignified elder statesman in a room full of shouting teenagers. A mainstream historical fact you absorb is the increasing importance of vexillological principles in the design of new flags for international organizations and even for micronations. The principles of simplicity, distinctiveness, and ease of reproduction became paramount. While our boring flag might fall short on distinctiveness in the traditional sense, its absolute simplicity and ease of reproduction made, paradoxically, a poster child for practical flag design. It was the minimalist ideal taken to its extreme, proving that sometimes less is not just more, but almost nothing. The quirky tidbit from this era involves a university art project that attempted to improve the boring flag by adding various modern design elements. They tried gradients, abstract shapes, even tiny, almost invisible holograms. Every attempt, however, only served to highlight the inherent perfection of its original blandness. The more they tried to make it interesting, the more profoundly boring it became in comparison. The students eventually gave up, concluding that the flag was unimprovable in its commitment to uninterest. You imagine them surrounded by discarded prototypes, looking utterly defeated, realizing they had met their match in the ultimate symbol of aesthetic indifference. The scholarly debate here is particularly amusing as it delves into the ethics of flag intervention. Is it morally acceptable to alter a flag that is so profoundly unremarkable? Does changing it betray its inherent philosophical statement of nothingness? Or does leaving it unchanged perpetuate a form of aesthetic neglect? You picture earnest art ethicists, their faces contorted in thoughtful contemplation, debating the moral implications of adding a tiny, almost imperceptible stripe to a flag that was designed to have none. It's a violation of its original intent, one might assert dramatically. No, it's an act of liberation from its self-imposed aesthetic prison. Another would counter, perhaps with a theatrical flourish. The answer, as always, remains delightfully subjective, lost in the subtle hues of academic opinion. You find yourself smiling at another joke. Why did the boring flag never get invited to the fashion show? Because it was always so last year. What's the boring flag's favorite podcast? Anything with a soothing, monotone voice. And finally, why did the boring flag get a standing ovation? Because everyone was so relieved it was over. These moments of quiet humor are like gentle sighs, punctuating the narrative with a sense of calm amusement. You appreciate the flag's unwavering commitment to its core identity, its steadfast refusal to be anything other than its perfectly, unpretentiously plain self. As you continue to drift, you sense a profound peace emanating from the story of this flag. It's a peace that comes from acceptance, from the quiet understanding that not everything needs to be exciting, dramatic, or attention-grabbing. Sometimes simply existing, simply being, is enough. It's the flag that reminds you to slow down, to breathe, to find beauty in the unremarkable, and to embrace the quiet simplicity of your own existence. And in that profound realization, a deep sense of serenity washes over you, lulling you deeper into the comforting embrace of sleep, a sleep as profound and undisturbed as the flag itself. You move into the contemporary era, the present moment, where the world is a kaleidoscope of constant updates, fleeting trends, and an endless stream of visual information. Yet, remarkably, our boring flag continues to exist, a quiet outlier in a cacophony of digital noise. You note a mainstream historical fact. In today's interconnected world, flags are seen more often than ever. From international sporting events streamed globally to digital avatars and social media profiles, national symbols are constantly being consumed, analyzed, and reinterpreted. Yet our dull flag persists, defying the gravitational pull of visual spectacle, remaining stubbornly, reassuringly, unremarkable. You see it perhaps as a tiny emoji on your phone, a subtle, almost unnoticeable presence among the vibrant array of digital symbols. The quirky tidbit that emerges from this current moment is the rise of online communities dedicated to flag appreciation for the terminally bored. These groups celebrate flags that are aesthetically challenged, deliberately plain, or just accidentally hilarious in their lack of design. Our boring flag naturally is their undisputed patron saint. Members share images of it, discuss its subtle nuances which, of course, are non-existent, and even engage in mock debates about its hidden depths. You imagine forum users, late at night, passionately typing. But the way the light catches the fabric, it's a silent scream of aesthetic emptiness. The scholarly debate often centers on the flag's surprising resilience in the face of modern design trends. Does its longevity prove that simplicity is the ultimate sophistication? Or does it simply indicate a profound apathy on the part of the nations that continue to use it? You picture contemporary vexillologists, their faces illuminated by laptop screens, grappling with the flag's enduring enigma. It's a testament to timeless design principles, one might argue, tapping their keyboard. Or it's just a very cheap flag to produce, another would quip, perhaps with a knowing wink to their virtual audience. The answer, as always, remains open to interpretation, as unspecific as the flag itself. A light joke surfaces in your mind. Why did the boring flag get left on read? Because it had no compelling visual content. Another one. What's the boring flag's favorite app to chill with? A white noise generator. And finally, why did the boring flag get mistaken for a wall? Because it was so incredibly unadorned. These little moments of amusement are like gentle, rhythmic breaths, keeping you engaged as you drift further into the story. You appreciate its unwavering commitment to its core identity, its steadfast refusal to be anything other than its perfectly, unpretentiously simple self. You observe the flag's quiet role in the realm of modern international relations. While diplomats from other nations might arrive with their vibrant banners, seeking to project power and influence, representatives from the nations flying our boring flag approach the global stage with a quiet confidence born of their flag's very blandness. It doesn't promise aggression, doesn't hint at grand ambitions. It simply states we are here, we exist, and we're perfectly content with our understated presence. You see it in the background of international summits, a quiet observer, never overshadowing, always just present. A mainstream historical fact you absorb is the growing trend towards digital flags and virtual representations of national identity. In online games, virtual worlds, and digital embassies, flags are becoming increasingly important as markers of belonging. Our boring flag, despite its lack of visual complexity, adapts seamlessly to these new formats, easily rendered as a single block of color, a testament to its universal simplicity. It's the ultimate scalable flag, perfect for any resolution, any screen size, because it's simply a color. The quirky tidbit from this era describes the surprising use of the boring flag in various mindfulness and meditation apps. Its pure, unblemished color field was deemed perfect for calming the mind, a visual anchor for those seeking respite from the overstimulating modern world. Users would reportedly stare at the digital representation of the flag for minutes on end, finding a profound sense of peace in its utter lack of detail.
You imagine an app review 5 stars? This flag has helped me achieve inner blandness. My mind is finally as empty as this flag.
The scholarly debate here is particularly intriguing, exploring the flag's unexpected role in promoting mental well-being. Is its inherent lack of visual interest genuinely conducive to relaxation and mindfulness, or is it merely a placebo effect, a projection of users' desire for calm onto a convenient blank canvas? You picture cognitive psychologists, their labs filled with biofeedback monitors and neuroimaging equipment, trying to measure the calming effect of a single color flag.
It reduces cognitive load,
one might excitedly declare, pointing to a brain scan.
Or people are just really tired,
another would counter, perhaps rubbing their own temples. The truth, as always, remains as serenely ambiguous as the flag itself. You find yourself smiling at another joke. Why did the boring flag start a podcast? Because it had a lot of nothing to say. What's the boring flag's favorite genre of film? Documentaries about paint drying. And finally, Why did the boring flag win the most chill award? Because it never got worked up about anything. These quiet moments of humor are like gentle currents, carrying you further into a state of serene contemplation. You appreciate the flag's unwavering commitment to its core identity, its steadfast refusal to be anything other than its perfectly, unpretentiously simple self. As you continue to drift, you begin to see the boring flag as a symbol of profound freedom. It's free from the burden of meaning, free from the expectations of grandeur, free from the fleeting trends of visual culture. It simply is. And in that profound simplicity, there's a liberating sense of calm, a quiet understanding that sometimes the most revolutionary act is simply to exist without fanfare. It's the flag that encourages you to find your own quiet space, to embrace the beauty of simplicity, and to allow yourself to surrender to the peaceful embrace of slumber. You now delve into the intricate relationship between the boring flag and the rise of universal symbolism, a concept that ironically found a quiet champion in our remarkably uninteresting banner. You observe a mainstream historical fact. As the world became more interconnected, there was an increasing need for symbols that could be understood across cultures, transcending linguistic and national barriers. Think of the universal symbols for restrooms or airports, or even basic directional arrows. These often relied on simplicity and abstract forms. Our boring flag, by its very nature, became an accidental pioneer in this field. Its utter lack of specific cultural markers made it, in a strange twist of fate, universally interpretable, or rather, universally uninterpretable in any specific way, which is its own kind of universality. You picture it in a textbook on global communication, a quiet case study in the power of a blank canvas. The quirky tidbit that emerges here is the story of a secret society, founded in the early 20th century, dedicated to promoting global peace through the adoption of universally boring symbols. Their ultimate goal was to convince all nations to adopt a flag identical to our boring flag, believing that if no country had a visually distinctive or provocative emblem, there would be less cause for conflict. Their motto was reportedly, "Boredom is the antidote to war," while their efforts, predictably, met with widespread indifference. Their core philosophy, however misguided, highlighted the unique potential of our flag's blandness. You imagine their clandestine meetings, held in dimly lit rooms, where members earnestly debated the optimal shade of beige for fostering world peace. The scholarly debate often focuses on the philosophical implications of meaning through an absence of meaning. Can a symbol, by deliberately offering no specific information, invite a broader, more inclusive interpretation, making it universally accessible? Or does it merely represent a failure of communication, a surrender to intellectual laziness? You picture semioticians, their minds buzzing with abstract concepts, analyzing the flag's zero-point symbolism. "It's the ultimate metonym for universality," one might declare, tracing invisible patterns in the air.
"No, it's just a flag that ran out of ideas,"
Another would counter, perhaps with a frustrated sigh, longing for a more exciting symbol to dissect. The answer, as always, remains delightfully inconclusive, as fluid and unformed as the flag itself. A light joke drifts into your mind. Why did the boring flag never get into arguments? Because it had no opinion worth fighting for. Another one. What's the boring flag's favorite philosophical concept? Existential nihilism, of course. And finally, why did the boring flag get good grades in philosophy class? Because it was always open to interpretation. These little moments of amusement are like gentle nudges, keeping you lightly engaged as the narrative continues its serene flow. You appreciate its unwavering commitment to its core identity, its steadfast refusal to be anything other than its perfectly, unpretentiously simple self. You observe the flag's quiet permeation into non-national contexts. Because of its sheer neutrality, it occasionally found use in international training exercises, humanitarian aid distribution, or even as a placeholder flag in fictional world-building scenarios. It became the default flag, the one you grabbed when you needed a flag, but not any particular flag. It was the visual equivalent of any color as long as it's black. Only in this case. Any color as long as it's a completely unremarkable one. You see it in a simulation, flying over a fictional peacekeeping zone. Its blandness signaling its purely functional role. A mainstream historical fact you absorb is the development of universal color codes in various fields, from maritime signaling to industrial safety. While not directly part of these systems, the boring flag with its single, unchanging hue indirectly contributed to the idea that color alone could convey meaning, even if that meaning was simply "this is a thing." Its consistency reinforced the notion that a single, stable color could hold symbolic weight, however understated. It was the silent, unassuming pioneer of color-based communication. The quirky tidbit from this era involves a scientific experiment conducted by linguists and cognitive scientists. They presented subjects from diverse cultural backgrounds with a variety of flags and asked them to describe their immediate associations. For most flags, responses varied widely, but for our boring flag, the overwhelming majority of responses were variations of nothing, plain neutral, or "I don't know." This experiment, however unexciting, confirmed the flag's astonishing ability to transcend specific cultural interpretations, achieving a truly universal lack of meaning. You imagine the scientists reviewing their data, a slight smile of satisfaction on their faces. Eureka! We've definitively proven that nothing means nothing across all demographics. The scholarly debate here humorously delves into the paradox of universal non-meaning. Is the flag's ultimate universality its greatest strength, allowing it to serve as a blank slate for diverse interpretations, or is it its greatest weakness, rendering it utterly incapable of conveying any specific message or inspiring any particular emotion? You picture linguists and philosophers, their minds wrestling with the abstract concept of null symbolism. It's the ultimate symbol of non-alignment, a visual pass in the game of national identity, one might argue passionately. No, it's merely a flag that forgot how to talk. Another would counter, perhaps with a dramatic shrug of resignation. The truth, as always, remains a delightfully uncolored shade of grey. You find yourself smiling at another joke. Why did the boring flag get an award for minimalism? Because it truly embraced the less is more philosophy. What's the boring flag's favorite meditation chant? Om, nothing, Om, nothing. And finally, why did the boring flag become a therapist? Because it was a great listener and never judged. These moments of quiet humor are like gentle, rhythmic breaths, keeping you engaged as you drift further into the story. You appreciate its unwavering commitment to its core identity, its steadfast refusal to be anything other than its perfectly, unpretentiously simple self. As you continue to drift, you begin to perceive the boring flag not as a symbol of something missing, but as a testament to the profound power of understated presence. It's the flag that reminds you that true universality often lies in simplicity, in the ability to be understood by everyone precisely, because it doesn't try to be anything specific. It's the flag that encourages you to find your own quiet space, to embrace the beauty of simplicity, and to allow yourself to surrender to the peaceful embrace of slumber, a slumber as universal and undisturbed as the flag itself. You journey now into the realm of architectural and urban planning, where the boring flag, in its quiet way, carved out a unique, if uncelebrated, niche. You observe a mainstream historical fact: the 20th and 21st centuries saw a massive expansion of urban centers, leading to new challenges in visual identity and public space. Flags were often used to demarcate districts, signify public buildings, or even to add a splash of color to otherwise drab cityscapes. Think of the deliberate use of bright banners in pedestrian zones or atop government buildings. Yet, our dull flag, with its unwavering commitment to blandness, found its own peculiar purpose in this evolving urban tapestry. You picture it, not atop a grand skyscraper, but perhaps discreetly marking a municipal building, a library, or a particularly unassuming park bench, its very quietude making it blend seamlessly into the background, rather than stand out. The quirky tidbit that emerges here is the tale of a city planner, an unsung hero of urban aesthetics, who, in a radical departure from conventional design, deliberately chose our boring flag as the official civic banner for his newly developed quiet zone district. His vision was to create an area free from visual clutter and sensory overload, a sanctuary of calm in a bustling metropolis. The flag, with its perfect lack of visual demand, was the cornerstone of this philosophy. Critics initially scoffed, but residents of the quiet zone reported unprecedented levels of tranquility and reduced stress. You imagine the city planner, proudly observing his creation, a subtle smile playing on his lips finally, a flag that knows how to just be. The scholarly debate often centers on the psychological impact of visual minimalism in urban environments. Does a flag like ours, with its profound simplicity, contribute to a sense of calm and order? Or does it merely lead to a feeling of emptiness and a lack of civic pride? You picture urban sociologists, armed with clipboards and questionnaires, interviewing residents about their emotional responses to the city's flag.
It promotes a sense of meditative space,
one might argue, passionately.
No, it makes me feel like I'm living in a monochrome spreadsheet,
another would counter, perhaps with a dramatic eye roll. The answer, as always, remains delightfully subjective, as elusive as a distinct pattern on the flag itself. A light joke floats into your mind. Why did the boring flag never get lost in the city? Because it was always overlooked. Another one, what's the boring flag's favorite architectural style? Brutalism, for its stark, unadorned concrete. And finally, why did the boring flag start a successful anti-graffiti campaign? Because no one could be bothered to vandalize something so incredibly uninteresting. These little moments of amusement are like gentle breezes, rustling the leaves of your consciousness and keeping you from drifting too far into the peaceful slumber that the flag itself seems to embody. You appreciate its unwavering commitment to its identity, its steadfast refusal to conform to the prevailing trends of urban grandiosity. You observe the flag's quiet presence in various public works projects. When a new bridge was built or a public garden inaugurated, the boring flag might be hoisted not as a symbol of triumph, but as a simple, understated marker of completion. It was the flag you used when you needed to officially signify something, but didn't want to draw too much attention to it. It was the flag of humble accomplishment, the banner of "we got it done. Now please don't make a fuss." You see it waving gently beside a newly paved road, its color matching the asphalt in a peculiar, unintentional harmony. A mainstream historical fact you absorb is the growing concern among urban planners about visual pollution, the excessive clutter of signs, advertisements, and discordant visual elements in public spaces. In this context, our boring flag, with its utterly clean and unblemished surface, became a surprising antidote. It offered a moment of visual respite, a calming blank space in an otherwise visually overwhelming environment. It was the visual equivalent of a silent moment in a noisy room, a refreshing pause for the overstimulated eye. The quirky tidbit from this era involves a peculiar municipal ordinance passed in a city that used our boring flag as its civic emblem. The ordinance stipulated that any public art commissioned for the city must adhere to the aesthetic principles of the flag, meaning it had to be subtly understated, profoundly unprovocative, and remarkably bland. This led to a series of art installations that were, by all accounts, spectacularly uninteresting, yet oddly calming. You imagine an art critic trying to review such an exhibition. The piece, titled Untitled Grey Square, evokes a profound sense of, well, It evokes nothing, which is, of course, its genius. The scholarly debate here, rather amusingly, delves into the concept of deliberate anti-aesthetics. Can a conscious rejection of conventional beauty and interest itself be a powerful artistic and urban planning statement? Does the flag, by its very boredom, challenge our preconceived notions of what a symbol should be? You picture art historians and philosophers, their faces etched with contemplation, debating the merits of intentional dullness.
It's a subversive act of aesthetic rebellion.
One might declare, passionately.
No, it's just really, really boring.
Another would counter, perhaps with a dramatic yawn. The truth, as always, remains delightfully as indistinct as the flag itself, shimmering in the twilight of abstract thought. You find yourself smiling at another joke. Why did the boring flag get hired as a building security guard? Because no one ever noticed it. What's the boring flag's favorite feature of modern architecture? The fire exit. And finally, why did the boring flag always get lost at the art fair? Because it kept trying to blend in with the white walls. These quiet moments of humor are like gentle sighs, punctuating the narrative with a sense of calm amusement. You appreciate the flag's unwavering commitment to its core identity, its steadfast refusal to be anything other than its perfectly, unpretentiously plain self. As you continue to drift, you sense a profound calm emanating from the story of this flag's place in the urban landscape. It's a calm that comes from quiet integration, from the subtle understanding that not everything needs to shout for attention to have a purpose. Sometimes, simply blending in, simply existing as a quiet part of the whole is enough. It's the flag that reminds you to find your own quiet space in the bustling world, to embrace the beauty of simplicity, and to allow yourself to surrender to the peaceful embrace of slumber, a slumber as serene and unadorned as the flag itself. You delve now into the curious relationship between the boring flag and the evolution of digital representation, a fascinating, if understated, chapter in its history. You observe a mainstream historical fact. The advent of the internet and digital media in the late 20th and early 21st centuries revolutionized how flags were displayed and consumed. From websites to video games, from mobile apps to virtual reality, flags became pixelated entities. Their designs translated into algorithms and rendered on screens. Think of the intricate detail that digital artists could achieve with other flags, showcasing their vibrant colors and complex emblems. Yet, our dull flag, by its very nature, became the simplest of digital entities, a testament to its inherent versatility and blandness. You see it perhaps as a single, unadorned color block in a design program, its digital form as unremarkable as its physical counterpart. The quirky tidbit that emerges here is the tale of a coding competition held in the early days of web design. The challenge was to render the most complex flag possible using the fewest lines of code. However, one maverick programmer submitted a solution for our boring flag, which consisted of essentially a single line of code specifying a color. The judges, initially baffled, were forced to admit its unparalleled efficiency. It was a triumph of minimalist programming, achieving maximal simplicity with minimal effort. You imagine the programmer accepting his prize, a humble smile on his face, muttering, "Sometimes, less truly is, just less, which is exactly what we needed." The scholarly debate often centers on the concept of digital aesthetic efficiency. Does the boring flag, by its inherent lack of visual data, represent the ultimate in efficient digital rendering, making it a perfectly optimized symbol for the digital age? Or does its blandness make it fundamentally unengaging in a world of rich multimedia experiences? You picture computer scientists and media theorists, their minds wrestling with the abstract concepts of visual information and processing power.
It's a perfectly streamlined bite-saver,
one might declare, tapping on a keyboard.
No, it's just a digital representation of profound apathy.
Another would counter, perhaps with a wary sigh, wishing for a flag with more polygons. The answer, as always, remains delightfully inconclusive, as indistinct as the flag's digital presence. A light joke floats into your mind. Why did the boring flag never crash a computer? Because it had no interesting features to overload the graphics card. Another one, what's the boring flag's favorite file format? Plain text. And finally, why did the boring flag get confused for a loading screen? Because it was always so static. These little moments of amusement are like gentle blinks, keeping you lightly engaged as the narrative continues its serene flow. You appreciate its unwavering commitment to its core identity, its steadfast refusal to be anything other than its perfectly, unpretentiously simple self. You observe the flag's quiet presence in the world of online avatars and digital identities. While many users crafted intricate and expressive digital representations of themselves, others, embracing the minimalist aesthetic, chose avatars that were simply a block of color, a direct homage to the boring flag. It became a subtle signal of anti-branding, a digital whisper of "I don't need a flashy identity to exist." You see it as a profile picture, blending seamlessly into the background, a silent protest against the tyranny of self-promotion. A mainstream historical fact you absorb is the increasing importance of accessibility in digital design. Websites and applications are increasingly built with features that cater to users with visual impairments, color blindness, or cognitive differences. Our boring flag, with its single uniform color, inherently possessed a remarkable degree of accessibility. Its simplicity meant it was easily distinguishable, or rather, its lack of distinction was easily distinguishable and less likely to cause visual fatigue or confusion. It was the inclusive flag, welcoming to all, precisely because it demanded so little of the viewer's visual processing. The quirky tidbit from this era involves an online art installation where artists created a vast digital mosaic composed entirely of our boring flag, each pixel representing a tiny iteration of the same color. The result was a surprisingly profound statement on uniformity and repetition. Viewers reported feeling a strange sense of calm, or conversely, a creeping existential dread, staring at the endless field of indistinguishable pixels. You imagine the artists gazing at their screen, a subtle smile of cosmic indifference on their faces. We have achieved peak blandness. Our work here is done. The scholarly debate here, rather humorously, delves into the concept of digital zen. Can the digital representation of a profoundly uninteresting flag truly induce a meditative state? Or is it merely a projection of users' desires for tranquility onto a visually unchallenging stimulus? You picture neuroscientists hooking up subjects to brain scanners, trying to measure the neural activity, or lack thereof, induced by staring at a screen filled with our boring flag.
It stimulates the default mode network,
one might excitedly declare, pointing to a brain scan.
Or it just puts people to sleep.
Another would counter, perhaps stifling a yawn of their own. The truth, as always, remains as serenely ambiguous as the flag itself, flickering in the digital ether. You find yourself smiling at another joke. Why did the boring flag never get any spam emails? Because its digital presence was too unremarkable to target. What's the boring flag's favorite video game? Anything with a very long loading screen. And finally, why did the boring flag get good reviews for its online presence? Because it never disappointed anyone by being anything other than what they expected, nothing. These quiet moments of humor are like gentle nudges, carrying you further into a state of serene contemplation. You appreciate its unwavering commitment to its core identity, its steadfast refusal to be anything other than its perfectly, unpretentiously simple self. As you continue to drift, you begin to perceive the boring flag not as a limitation, but as a silent triumph of digital adaptability. It's the flag that reminds you that in a world of increasing complexity and visual noise, sometimes the most effective design is the one that demands the least. It's the flag that encourages you to find your own quiet space in the digital realm, to embrace the beauty of simplicity, and to allow yourself to surrender to the peaceful embrace of slumber, a slumber as perfectly pixelated and undisturbed as the flag itself. You move now into the fascinating, yet often overlooked, intersection of the boring flag and the evolution of international communication and diplomacy. You observe a mainstream historical fact. As global interactions increased, the need for clear, unambiguous communication became paramount. Flags, while symbolic, also served practical roles in identifying nations and their intentions. Complex or easily confused designs could lead to misunderstandings, especially in high-stakes situations. Think of the careful protocols for displaying flags at international summits, or the subtle messages conveyed through flag positioning. Our boring flag, with its utter simplicity, became an accidental, yet effective, tool for unambiguous neutrality. You picture it in a diplomatic conference room, quietly signaling no hidden agenda here, just a solid color. The quirky tidbit that emerges here is the story of a particularly skilled diplomat from a nation flying our boring flag. He was renowned for his ability to diffuse tense negotiations, often simply by referring to his nation's flag as a symbol of their unwavering commitment to blandness. This unexpected honesty and self-deprecation would often disarm aggressive counterparts, who found it impossible to argue with such a profoundly unprovocative symbol. You imagine him leaning back in his chair, a subtle smile playing on his lips. As you can see from our national emblem, we are not here to stir trouble. We are here to calmly exist, much like our flag. The scholarly debate often centers on the concept of passive diplomacy. Can a flag, by its very lack of active visual signaling, become a powerful tool for de-escalation and the fostering of trust? Or does it merely represent a lack of national confidence, a surrender to the status quo? You picture political scientists and communication theorists, their minds grappling with the subtle nuances of non-verbal communication in international relations.
It's a profound statement of non-aggression,
one might argue, gesturing emphatically.
No, it's just a lack of artistic budget,
Another would quip, perhaps with a cynical smile. The answer, as always, remains delightfully inconclusive, as unspecific as the flag's message. A light joke floats into your mind. Why did the boring flag get chosen as the mediator? Because it never took sides. Another one, what's the boring flag's favorite diplomatic strategy? Passive resistance. And finally, why did the boring flag never get stuck in a long meeting? Because everyone quickly forgot it was there. These little moments of amusement are like gentle nudges, keeping you lightly engaged as the narrative continues its serene flow. You appreciate its unwavering commitment to its core identity, its steadfast refusal to be anything other than its perfectly, unpretentiously simple self. You observe the flag's quiet influence in the realm of international law and treaty negotiations. When new international bodies were formed, or new agreements drafted, the boring flag was often seen among the collection of national banners, a quiet participant in the grand architecture of global governance. It wasn't the flag of a nation that dictated terms, but one that quietly affirmed its participation, its commitment to the collective, however understated. It was the flag that said, "We're in. Just don't ask us to lead the parade." A mainstream historical fact you absorb is the increasing importance of visual consistency in international organizations. Logos, seals, and flags used by bodies like the United Nations, the World Health Organization, or the International Red Cross often adhere to principles of simplicity and universal recognition to avoid misinterpretation. Our boring flag, in its own way, embodied these principles long before they became formal guidelines, a testament to its accidental foresight in minimalist design. It was the prototype for universally recognizable blandness. The quirky tidbit from this era involves a peculiar incident at a high-level diplomatic dinner. A new delegate, unfamiliar with our boring flag, reportedly mistook it for a freshly laundered tablecloth draped over a flag stand. She politely asked if it could be removed before dinner was served, causing a brief, awkward silence before the true nature of the tablecloth was gently explained. You imagine the other delegates stifling their laughter, while the host, a stoic official from the nation of the boring flag, merely offered a polite, unreadable smile. Our flag, he might have said, is indeed quite versatile. The scholarly debate here, rather amusingly, delves into the concept of accidental camouflage in diplomatic settings. Did the flag's visual indistinction genuinely allow nations to operate with a lower profile, avoiding unwanted attention, or did it merely make them easy to overlook in crucial negotiations? You picture international relations experts debating the subtle power dynamics of visual presence and absence.
It's a brilliant strategy of strategic invisibility,
one might argue excitedly. No, it's just a flag that's really bad at standing out. Another would counter, perhaps with a theatrical sigh of exasperation. The truth, as always, remains as serenely ambiguous as the flag itself, fading gently into the background of historical narratives. You find yourself smiling at another joke. Why did the boring flag get invited to every peace talk? Because it was the only one that wouldn't cause a stir. What's the boring flag's favorite phrase in diplomacy? Let's agree to disagree, quietly. And finally, why did the boring flag never get a medal for bravery? Because it never did anything remotely exciting. These quiet moments of humor are like gentle whispers, carrying you further into a state of serene contemplation. You appreciate its unwavering commitment to its core identity, its steadfast refusal to be anything other than its perfectly, unpretentiously simple self. As you continue to drift, you begin to perceive the boring flag not as a symbol of weakness, but as a quiet testament to the power of discretion and the virtue of understatement in a world often consumed by loud declarations. It's the flag that reminds you that true influence can sometimes be found not in what you project, but in what you subtly suggest. It's the flag that encourages you to find your own quiet voice, to embrace the beauty of simplicity, and to allow yourself to surrender to the peaceful embrace of slumber, a slumber as diplomatically serene and undisturbed as the flag itself. You now turn your attention to the surprising impact of the boring flag on the world of design theory and aesthetics, a field where its very blandness became a point of profound contemplation. You observe a mainstream historical fact. The 20th century saw the rise of various design movements, from Bauhaus to minimalism, all seeking to redefine aesthetic principles. These movements often emphasized simplicity, functionality, and the elimination of superfluous ornamentation. Our boring flag, long before these formal movements, embodied many of these principles to an extreme degree, becoming an accidental, yet perfect example of ultimate minimalism. You picture it in a design museum, not as a celebrated artwork, but as a conceptual piece, forcing viewers to confront the very nature of visual perception. The quirky tidbit that emerges here is the story of a renowned, albeit eccentric, design guru who, frustrated by the excesses of modern graphic design, declared our boring flag to be the most perfect symbol ever created. He argued that its utter lack of design elements forced the viewer to confront the purity of form and color itself, transcending mere aesthetics to achieve a state of sublime emptiness. He even started a cult following, whose members would meditate on reproductions of the flag, seeking enlightenment through absolute visual neutrality. You imagine him, eyes closed, solemnly intoning, "Beige is the path to nirvana. Embrace the void." The scholarly debate often centers on the paradox of intentional anti-design. Can a flag, by deliberately being uninteresting, become a profound artistic statement, forcing viewers to question their own expectations of what constitutes good design? Or does it merely represent a failure of creative imagination, a surrender to the path of least resistance? You picture art critics and design theorists, their minds grappling with the abstract concepts of beauty and meaning in the context of absolute plainness. It's a revolutionary act of aesthetic subversion, one might argue, passionately.
No, it's just a lazy flag,
Another would counter, perhaps with a dismissive wave of the hand. The answer, as always, remains delightfully inconclusive, as open to interpretation as the flag itself. A light joke floats into your mind. Why did the boring flag get rejected from art school? Because it lacked character. Another one. What's the boring flag's favorite design principle? Negative space. And finally, why did the boring flag never win a beauty contest? Because it simply blended in with the backdrop. These little moments of amusement are like gentle flickers of light in a dim room, keeping you gently engaged as the narrative unfurls. You appreciate its unwavering commitment to its core identity, its steadfast refusal to be anything other than its perfectly, unpretentiously simple self. You observe the flag's quiet influence on the development of neutral palettes in interior design and fashion. As the aesthetic of understated elegance gained popularity, designers looked for colors that were calming, versatile, and unobtrusive. Our boring flag's hue, by its very nature, became a perfect example of such a color finding its way into minimalist homes and runway collections. It wasn't about making a statement, but about creating a harmonious backdrop that allowed other elements to shine, or simply to exist peacefully. You see it as a swatch in a designer's portfolio, a subtle, yet essential, component of a sophisticatedly serene scheme. A mainstream historical fact you absorb is the psychological impact of color on human emotion and behavior. While vibrant colors are often associated with excitement and energy, muted, neutral tones like those of our boring flag are linked to calmness, stability, and even introspection. In a world increasingly saturated with high-energy visuals, the flag offered a subtle yet powerful antidote, a visual balm for the overstimulated mind. It was the visual equivalent of a gentle whisper in a noisy crowd, a calming presence in a chaotic world. The quirky tidbit from this era involves a peculiar design firm that specialized in creating invisible branding logos and visual identities so subtle and understated that they barely registered consciously with the consumer. Their ultimate goal was to design a brand that was as forgettable as the world's most boring flag. They believed that true brand loyalty came not from flashy recognition, but from a subliminal sense of unobtrusive familiarity. You imagine them, brainstorming sessions filled with long silences and whispered suggestions, aiming for the ultimate in aesthetic non-impact. The scholarly debate here, rather amusingly, delves into the ethical implications of subliminal blandness. Is it manipulative to design symbols that are so uninteresting they bypass conscious thought and subtly influence perception? Or is it merely a clever application of psychological principles in design? You picture advertising ethicists and psychologists, their faces contorted in thoughtful contemplation, debating the moral nuances of a flag that seeks to be utterly unremarkable. It's a brilliant form of persuasive understatement, one might assert dramatically. No, it's just a way to avoid criticism by being completely unnoticeable. Another would counter, perhaps with a theatrical sigh. The truth, as always, remains as serenely ambiguous as the flag itself, fading gently into the background of commercial theory. You find yourself smiling at another joke. Why did the boring flag get a job as a minimalist art curator? Because it was an expert in finding beauty in nothing. What's the boring flag's favorite color? The absence of color, of course. And finally, why did the boring flag get excellent reviews for its design? Because it was perfectly functional and never tried to be something it wasn't. These quiet moments of humor are like gentle sighs, punctuating the narrative with a sense of calm amusement. You appreciate the flag's unwavering commitment to its core identity, its steadfast refusal to be anything other than its perfectly, unpretentiously plain self. As you continue to drift, you sense a profound peace emanating from the story of this flag's influence on the world of design. It's a peace that comes from the quiet understanding that true elegance can sometimes be found not in ornate details, but in absolute simplicity. It's the flag that reminds you to strip away the superfluous, to embrace the essence of things, and to allow yourself to surrender to the peaceful embrace of slumber, a slumber as aesthetically pure and undisturbed as the flag itself. You now explore the unexpected role of the boring flag in the realm of psychology and human perception, a field where its very blandness offered unique insights into how our brains process visual information. You observe a mainstream historical fact. Cognitive psychology has long studied how humans perceive and react to different visual stimuli, from colors to shapes to patterns. Highly complex or novel stimuli often trigger strong reactions, while simple, familiar ones are processed with less cognitive effort. Our boring flag, with its singular, undemanding hue, became a curious outlier in these studies, demonstrating the profound power of visual neutrality. You picture it in a psychology lab, a quiet, unassuming test subject, its very simplicity revealing surprising truths about the human mind. The quirky tidbit that emerges here is the story of a psychologist who, while researching the effects of visual clutter on stress levels, accidentally discovered that prolonged exposure to our boring flag led to a significant reduction in anxiety among test subjects. He initially dismissed it as a statistical anomaly, but repeated experiments confirmed the blandness effect. He theorized that the flag, by offering absolutely nothing for the brain to process, allowed the mind to simply rest. You imagine him, excitedly presenting his findings to a skeptical audience, and then, after staring at this utterly uninteresting flag for 5 minutes,
Their alpha waves increased dramatically.
the scholarly debate often centers on whether the blandness effect is a true psychological phenomenon or merely a reflection of the participants' pre-existing desire for calm. Is the flag intrinsically calming, or does its lack of stimulation merely allow individuals to project their own sense of peace onto it? You picture neuroscientists and cognitive psychologists, their minds wrestling with the elusive nature of subjective experience.
It's a powerful tool for inducing a meditative state,
One might argue, pointing to brain scans. No, it just means people are desperate for a break from all the bright screens. Another would counter, perhaps with a weary sigh, wishing for a more stimulating research topic. The answer, as always, remains delightfully inconclusive, as subtly nuanced as the flag's perceived impact. A light joke floats into your mind. Why did the boring flag become a therapist? Because it was an expert at helping people clear their minds. Another one. What's the boring flag's favorite brain exercise? Staring blankly into space. And finally, why did the boring flag always win at mindfulness retreats? Because it was perfectly present in its own nothingness. These little moments of amusement are like gentle blinks, keeping you lightly engaged as the narrative continues its serene flow. You appreciate its unwavering commitment to its core identity, its steadfast refusal to be anything other than its perfectly, unpretentiously simple self. You observe the flag's quiet adoption in various therapeutic and relaxation settings, in sensory deprivation tanks in calming rooms, and in virtual reality environments designed for stress reduction. The boring flag's color or a similar shade became a preferred visual element. It was used as a background, a visual anchor, a gentle reminder that sometimes the best way to calm the mind is to offer it nothing to latch onto. You see it as the backdrop in a meditation app, a serene, unblemished field, inviting you to let your thoughts drift away. A mainstream historical fact you absorb is the increasing recognition of the importance of digital detox. and the dangers of constant visual stimulation in the modern world. Our boring flag, by its inherent lack of stimulation, became a quiet, symbolic counterpoint to this trend. It represented a visual off switch, a deliberate choice to disengage from the relentless bombardment of exciting imagery and simply rest the eyes and mind. It was the visual equivalent of a quiet evening at home after a long, stimulating day. The quirky tidbit from this era involves a peculiar trend among performance artists who sought to challenge audience perception. One artist reportedly staged a performance where the audience was invited to stare at a large, perfectly rendered replica of our boring flag for an hour, followed by a discussion of their experiences. While some found it agonizingly dull, others reported profound insights, vivid dreams, and even feelings of transcendence. The performance, titled The Great Blankness, became a cult sensation, much to the artist's bewildered amusement. You imagine the artist shrugging, "I just hung a flag." The audience did all the work. The scholarly debate here, rather amusingly, delves into the paradox of perceived meaning in visual emptiness. Does the flag, by offering no direct meaning, invite the viewer to project their own internal states and interpretations onto it, thus revealing more about the viewer than the flag itself? Or does its emptiness truly possess a unique, inherent psychological effect? You picture philosophers of aesthetics and psychologists, their minds wrestling with the abstract concepts of perception and projection. It's a mirror to the soul's quiet yearning, one might assert, dramatically. "No, it's just a beige wall with a string attached." Another would counter, perhaps with a cynical chuckle. The truth, as always, remains as serenely ambiguous as the flag itself, shimmering in the twilight of abstract thought. You find yourself smiling at another joke. Why did the boring flag never get a headache? Because it never had anything too stimulating to look at. What's the boring flag's favorite self-help book? The Power of Less. And finally, why did the boring flag get good reviews from insomniacs? Because it was truly mesmerizing in its lack of excitement. These quiet moments of humor are like gentle sighs, punctuating the narrative with a sense of calm amusement. You appreciate the flag's unwavering commitment to its core identity, its steadfast refusal to be anything other than its perfectly, unpretentiously simple self. As you continue to drift, you sense a profound peace emanating from the story of this flag's unexpected role in human psychology. It's a peace that comes from the quiet understanding that sometimes the most profound experiences arise not from external stimulation, but from internal stillness. It's the flag that reminds you to quiet your mind, to embrace the beauty of simplicity, and to allow yourself to surrender to the peaceful embrace of slumber, a slumber as psychologically serene and undisturbed as the flag itself. You now explore the curious journey of the boring flag through the realm of pop culture and media, a landscape typically dominated by vibrant, attention-grabbing visuals. You observe a mainstream historical fact from movies to music videos, from advertising campaigns to viral memes. Popular culture thrives on striking imagery and memorable symbols. Flags, when they appear, are often used to evoke strong emotions, identify characters, or set a dramatic scene. Think of the iconic flags in superhero movies or the national banners waved during triumphant sporting events. Yet, our dull flag, with its unwavering commitment to unremarkability, navigated this visually saturated environment with an almost invisible grace, finding its own peculiar niche. You picture it in a background shot of a film, a fleeting, almost subliminal element, utterly unremarkable yet quietly present. The quirky tidbit that emerges here is the surprising popularity of the boring flag as a blank canvas for internet meme culture. Users would take images of the flag and overlay text, absurd drawings, or ironic statements, turning its inherent blandness into a humorous commentary on the absurdity of modern life. The flag itself, by offering no strong visual identity, became the perfect neutral ground for satirical expression. You imagine online artists with mischievous grins, crafting memes featuring the flag, perhaps with the caption, "My energy level on a Monday morning." The scholarly debate often centers on the concept of ironic appropriation in popular culture. Does the boring flag, by being co-opted and reinterpreted with humorous intent, gain a new layer of meaning and relevance? Or does it merely confirm its fundamental lack of inherent interest? You picture cultural theorists and media studies academics, their minds wrestling with the elusive nature of post-ironic symbolism. It's a testament to the flag's versatility as a signifier of emptiness. One might argue, passionately, "No, it just means people are bored and have too much time on their hands." Another would counter, perhaps with a dismissive wave of the hand. The answer, as always, remains delightfully inconclusive, as open to interpretation as the flag itself. A light joke floats into your mind. Why did the boring flag never get a cameo in a blockbuster movie? Because it was too plain to be a star. Another one, what's the boring flag's favorite genre of music? Ambient background noise. And finally, why did the boring flag go to the comedy club? Because it was hoping someone would finally notice its punchline or lack thereof. These little moments of amusement are like gentle flickers of light in a dim room, keeping you gently engaged as the narrative unfurls. You appreciate its unwavering commitment to its core identity, its steadfast refusal to be anything other than its perfectly, unpretentiously simple self. You observe the flag's quiet presence in the world of video games and virtual environments. While other flags might serve as emblems for powerful factions or visually striking landmarks, our boring flag would often appear as a generic placeholder, a background element for a neutral zone, or simply a visual cue for a nondescript entity. It was the flag you used when you needed a flag to exist, but not necessarily to mean anything specific or to be visually engaging. You see it in the corner of a virtual map, a small, unclickable, uninteresting icon. A mainstream historical fact you absorb is the increasing trend of minimalist branding in contemporary marketing. Companies often seek clean, uncluttered logos and visual identities to convey sophistication and universality. Our boring flag, by its inherent lack of visual noise, inadvertently became a perfect example of this aesthetic, a symbol of extreme minimalism that, ironically, became a touchstone for designers seeking to achieve a similar level of refined simplicity. It was the ultimate less is more example, taken to its logical and utterly uninteresting extreme. The quirky tidbit from this era involves a peculiar online challenge where users were dared to create the most unviral content possible. The winner, a content creator who uploaded a 10-hour video loop of our boring flag gently flapping in the wind, garnered millions of views not for its excitement, but for its sheer, mind-numbing repetition. Viewers reportedly used it as a backdrop for studying, sleeping, or simply escaping the relentless stimulation of the internet. You imagine the content creator, utterly baffled by their accidental success. "I just wanted to prove that boredom can be profound, I guess." The scholarly debate here, rather amusingly, delves into the concept of anti-engagement in media. Does content that is deliberately uninteresting, like the looping video of the flag, paradoxically become more engaging by challenging user expectations and offering a unique kind of mental white space? Or does it merely confirm that some things are just intrinsically boring, no matter how much you try to intellectualize them? You picture media psychologists and communication theorists, their minds wrestling with the elusive nature of audience attention in the digital age. "It's a brilliant commentary on media oversaturation," one might assert dramatically. "No, it's just a beige screensaver," another would counter, perhaps with a theatrical yawn. The truth, as always, remains as serenely ambiguous as the flag itself, fading gently into the background of online discourse. You find yourself smiling at another joke, Why did the boring flag never get any fan mail? Because it was too forgettable to inspire devotion. What's the boring flag's favorite reality TV show? Anything with extremely low stakes and predictable outcomes. And finally, why did the boring flag go to the party? Because it was promised a quiet corner and no one would ask it to dance. These quiet moments of humor are like gentle sighs, punctuating the narrative with a sense of calm amusement. You appreciate the flag's unwavering commitment to its core identity, its steadfast refusal to be anything other than its perfectly, unpretentiously plain self. As you continue to drift, you sense a profound peace emanating from the story of this flag's surprising journey through pop culture. It's a peace that comes from the quiet understanding that not everything needs to be a spectacle to exist, that there's a unique kind of power in being simply, reliably, and utterly unremarkable. It's the flag that reminds you to step back from the noise, to find your own quiet rhythm, and to allow yourself to surrender to the peaceful embrace of slumber, a slumber as undisturbingly present as the flag itself. You now consider the unique narrative of the boring flag within the realm of education and pedagogy, a space where symbols are often used to convey complex ideas and inspire learning. You observe a mainstream historical fact. Flags are frequently used in classrooms to teach geography, history, and civic lessons, serving as visual aids that help students grasp national identities and cultural differences. Think of the vibrant world maps adorned with national flags, each a distinct burst of color and pattern. Yet, our dull flag, with its unwavering commitment to visual simplicity, presented a peculiar challenge and, surprisingly, an unexpected opportunity within educational contexts. You picture it on a classroom wall, perhaps near the bottom of a display of flags, quietly, patiently awaiting its turn to be discussed, if it ever is. The quirky tidbit that emerges here is the tale of a particularly insightful history teacher who, when presenting our boring flag to her class, deliberately refrained from offering any specific information about the nation it represented. Instead, she asked her students to discuss what the flag didn't say and what that absence of information communicated. This exercise reportedly sparked some of the most profound and philosophical discussions in her class, with students debating the nature of identity, neutrality, and the power of understatement. You imagine the teacher smiling knowingly as her students grappled with the profound implications of a single, unadorned color. Sometimes, she might have said, "The most important lessons are found in the silences." The scholarly debate often centers on the pedagogical value of negative space learning. Can a symbol that offers no direct visual cues truly encourage deeper, more abstract thinking, forcing students to engage with the concept of meaning itself? Or does it merely represent a missed opportunity for engaging visual instruction, leading to disinterest and confusion? You picture educational theorists and cognitive psychologists, their minds wrestling with the elusive nature of learning through absence. It cultivates critical thinking and interpretation, one might argue, passionately.
No, it just makes kids fall asleep.
Another would counter, perhaps with a dramatic yawn. The answer, as always, remains delightfully inconclusive, as open to interpretation as the flag's educational impact. A light joke floats into your mind. Why did the boring flag get good grades in philosophy? Because it understood the concept of nothingness. Another one. What's the boring flag's favorite subject in school? Recess, because it's unstructured and has no clear objective. And finally, why did the boring flag never get called on in class? Because it blended in perfectly with the whiteboard. These little moments of amusement are like gentle blinks, keeping you lightly engaged as the narrative continues its serene flow. You appreciate its unwavering commitment to its core identity, its steadfast refusal to be anything other than its perfectly, unpretentiously simple self. You observe the flag's quiet adoption in various educational tools designed for universal understanding, in multilingual dictionaries, in diagrams explaining basic concepts, or in software interfaces for global audiences. The boring flag's color or a similar shade became a preferred visual element when a generic, placeholder flag was needed. It was the visual equivalent of a blank line on a form, a neutral space to be filled, or simply acknowledged as other. You see it in a learning app, a subtle, almost unnoticeable presence among the vibrant array of more complex national symbols. A mainstream historical fact you absorb is the growing trend towards inclusive design in educational materials, aiming to ensure that content is accessible and understandable to students from diverse backgrounds and with varying learning styles. Our boring flag, with its single, uniform color, inherently possessed a remarkable degree of inclusivity. Its simplicity meant it was less likely to trigger cultural biases or create visual overload, allowing students to focus on the broader concepts being taught, rather than being distracted by the flag itself. It was the quietly universal flag, welcoming to all, precisely because it demanded so little of the viewer's cultural interpretation. The quirky tidbit from this era involves a peculiar educational initiative, where children from different countries were asked to draw a flag that represented peace. While most children drew doves, olive branches, or rainbows, a surprising number of them, independently, drew a single, unblemished block of color, remarkably similar to our boring flag. This unexpected convergence suggested a primal, intuitive understanding that simplicity and neutrality were inherently linked to the concept of peace. You imagine the educators, reviewing the drawings, a subtle smile of wonder on their faces. They understood. They understood the profound power of nothing. The scholarly debate here, rather humorously, delves into the concept of innate symbolism. Do children, unburdened by complex cultural associations, instinctively grasp the universal meaning of visual simplicity, even when it translates to a lack of discernible features? Or is it merely a product of limited drawing skills, a preference for the easiest possible design? You picture child psychologists and art educators, their minds wrestling with the abstract concepts of inherent understanding and developmental limitations. It's a beautiful expression of pre-linguistic universalism, one might assert dramatically. No, it's just what happens when you give a kid a crayon and no specific instructions, another would counter, perhaps with a theatrical sigh. The truth, as always, remains as serenely ambiguous as the flag itself, fading gently into the background of developmental theory. You find yourself smiling at another joke. Why did the boring flag get a scholarship to art school? Because it was a master of negative space. What's the boring flag's favorite classroom activity? Staring out the window. And finally, why did the boring flag never get picked for a school play? Because it was too good at blending into the scenery. These quiet moments of humor are like gentle sighs, punctuating the narrative with a sense of calm amusement. You appreciate the flag's unwavering commitment to its core identity, its steadfast refusal to be anything other than its perfectly, unpretentiously simple self. As you continue to drift, you sense a profound peace emanating from the story of this flag's unexpected role in education. It's a peace that comes from the quiet understanding that sometimes the most profound lessons are not taught, but discovered, not through grand displays, but through subtle invitations to contemplation. It's the flag that reminds you to simplify, to focus on the essence, and to allow yourself to surrender to the peaceful embrace of slumber, a slumber as intellectually serene and undisturbed as the flag itself. You now consider the fascinating, almost paradoxical, influence of the boring flag on the realm of conceptual art and philosophical thought, a space where its very emptiness became a profound statement. You observe a mainstream historical fact. The 20th century witnessed the rise of conceptual art movements, that challenged traditional notions of beauty and meaning, often elevating ideas over aesthetic form. Artists would use mundane objects, found materials, or even just text to provoke thought and question artistic conventions. Our boring flag, with its utter lack of inherent visual interest, became an accidental, yet perfect, muse for these movements, embodying the ultimate ready-made of national symbolism. You picture it in a gallery, not framed on a wall, but perhaps simply folded on a pedestal, its presence forcing viewers to confront the very nature of symbolism and identity. The quirky tidbit that emerges here is the tale of an avant-garde artist who, inspired by the boring flag, created a series of invisible sculptures. These pieces consisted of nothing but the idea of a sculpture occupying a specific space, challenging the audience to see the art through their own imagination. The artist, upon being asked about his inspiration, simply pointed to a blurred photograph of our boring flag and declared, "It taught me that the most powerful art is the art that isn't there." His exhibitions, predictably, were met with both profound admiration and utter bewilderment. You imagine him standing proudly in an empty room, explaining to bewildered patrons, "The masterpiece is in your mind! Now, how about a small donation?" The scholarly debate often centers on the very definition of art in the context of extreme minimalism. Can an object so devoid of discernible features truly be considered art? Or does its inclusion merely expose the pretentious nature of the art world itself? You picture art philosophers and critics, their minds wrestling with the abstract concepts of intentionality, perception, and subjective interpretation.
It's a radical deconstruction of aesthetic paradigms,
one might argue passionately.
No, it's just a blank piece of fabric,
Another would counter, perhaps with a dismissive wave of the hand. The answer, as always, remains delightfully inconclusive, as open to interpretation as the flag itself. A light joke floats into your mind. Why did the boring flag refuse to be painted? Because it preferred its natural state of conceptual emptiness. Another one, what's the boring flag's favorite philosophical school of thought? Absurdism, for its embrace of meaninglessness. And finally, why did the boring flag get excellent reviews from existentialists? Because it perfectly embodied the void. These little moments of amusement are like gentle blinks, keeping you lightly engaged as the narrative continues its serene flow. You appreciate its unwavering commitment to its core identity, its steadfast refusal to be anything other than its perfectly, unpretentiously simple self. You observe the flag's quiet role in debates about national identity in a globalized world. As cultures blended and borders became more porous, some theorists argued for a post-national identity, one that transcended traditional, often divisive national symbols. Our boring flag, with its inherent neutrality, became a surprising candidate for a universal anti-national flag, a symbol that acknowledged existence without demanding allegiance or promoting distinction. It was the flag for everyone and no one, a quiet testament to the idea of a shared, yet unspecific, human experience. You see it in a theoretical diagram, a placeholder for universal identity, its blandness a perfect fit. A mainstream historical fact you absorb is the growing interest in negative theology and other philosophical traditions that seek meaning through the contemplation of absence or nothingness. Our boring flag, by its very nature, provided a tangible, if unexciting, entry point into such contemplation. Its visual void invited viewers to consider what wasn't there, prompting deeper introspection about the nature of being and non-being. It was the philosophical equivalent of a silent meditation, a visual cone for the inquiring mind. The quirky tidbit from this era involves a peculiar philosophical society that, in an effort to achieve ultimate enlightenment, adopted the boring flag as their official emblem. They believed that by focusing on a symbol utterly devoid of external distractions, they could better connect with their inner selves and the universal consciousness. Their meetings reportedly involved long periods of silent contemplation, staring at the flag, followed by intense, yet utterly incomprehensible, discussions about the ontological implications of beige. You imagine them, eyes glazed over, earnestly debating the precise shade of nothingness. The scholarly debate here, rather amusingly, delves into the concept of metaphysical vexillology. Can a flag, by its profound lack of visual information, truly unlock deeper levels of consciousness or reveal fundamental truths about existence? Or is it merely an excuse for academics to ponder abstract concepts while staring at a blank piece of fabric? You picture metaphysicians and mystics, their minds wrestling with the profound implications of an empty symbol. It's a portal to the transcendent, one might assert dramatically. No,
It's just a flag you forgot to decorate.
another would counter, perhaps with a cynical chuckle. The truth, as always, remains as serenely ambiguous as the flag itself, shimmering in the twilight of abstract thought. You find yourself smiling at another joke. Why did the boring flag never have an identity crisis? Because it was perfectly comfortable with being undefined. What's the boring flag's favorite philosophical question? Why anything when there could be nothing? And finally, why did the boring flag get invited to every intellectual salon? Because it was the perfect conversation starter about, well, everything and nothing. These quiet moments of humor are like gentle sighs, punctuating the narrative with a sense of calm amusement. You appreciate the flag's unwavering commitment to its core identity, its steadfast refusal to be anything other than its perfectly, unpretentiously simple self. As you continue to drift, you sense a profound peace emanating from the story of this flag's unexpected role in conceptual thought. It's a peace that comes from the quiet understanding that sometimes the deepest insights arise not from complexity, but from profound simplicity, not from grand statements, but from profound silence. It's the flag that reminds you to look beyond the obvious, to embrace the beauty of absence, and to allow yourself to surrender to the peaceful embrace of slumber, a slumber as philosophically serene and undisturbed as the flag itself. You journey now into the realm of speculative futures and alternative histories, where the boring flag, in its quiet way, continues to hold a unique, if understated, place. You observe a mainstream historical fact throughout history. Societies have imagined utopian futures or explored divergent paths, often envisioning their flags as symbols of these new paradigms. From futuristic city-states to interstellar federations, fictional flags tend to be highly symbolic, reflecting the aspirations of their creators. Yet, even in these imaginative landscapes, our dull flag, with its unwavering commitment to profound neutrality, finds a surprisingly consistent role. You picture it in a science fiction novel, perhaps the flag of a neutral space station, or a quiet, unassuming colony on a distant, equally unremarkable planet. The quirky tidbit that emerges here is the concept of a hypothetical future where, after centuries of escalating conflicts fueled by nationalistic symbols, humanity collectively decided to adopt a single, universal flag identical to our boring flag. The era of blandness was ushered in, where all national flags were replaced by this simple, unadorned banner, thus eliminating one of the perceived causes of historical division. While some argued it stripped humanity of its vibrant cultural diversity, others celebrated it as the ultimate triumph of peace through visual surrender. You imagine diplomats signing the Treaty of Universal Beige, a collective sigh of quiet resignation echoing through the room. The scholarly debate often centers on the psychological implications of such a utopian future. Would a world united under a bland flag truly foster peace and harmony, or would the suppression of distinct visual identities lead to a deeper, more insidious form of cultural homogeneity and spiritual stagnation? You picture futurists and cultural philosophers, their minds wrestling with the abstract concepts of identity and unity. It's the ultimate path to global cooperation. One might argue, passionately. No, it's a terrifying vision of aesthetic authoritarianism. Another would counter, perhaps with a dramatic shudder. The answer, as always, remains delightfully inconclusive, as unformed and open-ended as the future itself. A light joke floats into your mind. Why did the boring flag get recruited for the intergalactic peace talks? Because it was the only one that didn't provoke any alien species. Another one, what's the boring flag's favorite for genre? Anything that's extremely low budget and has no special effects. And finally, why did the boring flag never join a space fleet? Because it preferred its personal space, which was mostly empty. These little moments of amusement are like gentle blinks, keeping you lightly engaged as the narrative continues its serene flow. You appreciate its unwavering commitment to its core identity, its steadfast refusal to be anything other than its perfectly, unpretentiously simple self. You observe the flag's quiet presence in various thought experiments about post-scarcity societies or fully automated worlds. In these imagined futures, where human needs are met without effort and conflict is obsolete, the need for grand, symbolic flags diminishes. The boring flag, with its inherent lack of meaning or purpose beyond mere identification, becomes a surprisingly fitting symbol for such a world where identity is fluid and ostentation is meaningless. You see it in a speculative blueprint for a future city, a subtle marker of communal space, its blandness a symbol of quiet abundance. A mainstream historical fact you absorb is the recurring human fascination with creating universal languages or universal symbols to bridge divides. From Esperanto to various attempts at international auxiliary languages, the desire for common ground has been a powerful motivator. Our boring flag, by its sheer visual neutrality, inadvertently fulfilled a similar role in the visual realm, offering a symbol that could be recognized by all, precisely because it resonated with none. It was the visual equivalent of a common denominator, albeit a very, very small one. The quirky tidbit from this era involves a peculiar future archaeological discovery. Excavators unearth a time capsule from the era of blandness, containing only a perfectly preserved replica of our boring flag. Future historians, completely lacking context for such a seemingly meaningless artifact, engage in wild, imaginative theories about its purpose. Was it a religious symbol, a cosmic joke, a warning? Its very blandness led to an explosion of overthinking and convoluted interpretations, proving that sometimes nothing can be the most profound mystery of all. You imagine them scratching their heads, utterly stumped by the elegant simplicity of its pointlessness. The scholarly debate here, rather humorously, delves into the ethical implications of enforced blandness in a utopian context. If a society were to adopt a boring flag for the sake of peace, would it be a noble sacrifice of individual expression or a tyrannical imposition of aesthetic conformity? You picture ethicists and social philosophers, their minds wrestling with the delicate balance between unity and diversity. It's a necessary compromise for global harmony, one might assert dramatically. No, it's a chilling vision of a world without passion, another would counter, perhaps with a theatrical shudder. The truth, as always, remains as serenely ambiguous as the flag itself, fading gently into the background of speculative thought. You find yourself smiling at another joke. Why did the boring flag get chosen as the emblem for the Galactic Library? Because it represented all knowledge, and none at the same time. What's the boring flag's favorite futuristic invention? The universal remote that has no buttons. And finally, why did the boring flag never get caught in a temporal paradox? Because it was too simple to create any causal loops. These quiet moments of humor are like gentle sighs, punctuating the narrative with a sense of calm amusement. You appreciate the flag's unwavering commitment to its core identity, its steadfast refusal to be anything other than its perfectly, unpretentiously simple self. As you continue to drift, You sense a profound peace emanating from the story of this flag's quiet journey through imagined futures. It's a peace that comes from the quiet understanding that sometimes the most harmonious path is not found in grand designs, but in gentle agreements, not in loud declarations, but in subtle understandings. It's the flag that reminds you to embrace the elegance of simplicity, to find your own quiet purpose, and to allow yourself to surrender to the peaceful embrace of slumber, a slumber as serenely futuristic and undisturbed as the flag itself. You now explore the fascinating, almost spiritual connection between the boring flag and the enduring human quest for inner peace and mindfulness. You observe a mainstream historical fact throughout history. Various spiritual traditions have sought to achieve states of inner calm, detachment, and enlightenment, often through practices like meditation, contemplation, and the reduction of external stimuli. Many of these practices emphasize simplicity, focus, and the release of worldly attachments. Our boring flag, with its profound lack of visual distraction, became an accidental, yet remarkably effective, tool in this pursuit. You picture it in a meditation hall, a quiet, unassuming backdrop for deep contemplation, its very plainness inviting a surrender to inner stillness. The quirky tidbit that emerges here is the story of a reclusive spiritual guru who, after years of searching for the ultimate symbol of inner tranquility, reportedly found it in a faded, decades-old photograph of our boring flag. He believed its utter lack of detail represented the enlightened mind, free from the clutter of worldly desires and distractions. His followers would spend hours gazing at the flag, attempting to achieve a state of perfect visual emptiness. You imagine him, cross-legged, eyes gently closed, softly murmuring, "The beige is the path. Embrace the great nothingness." The scholarly debate often centers on the concept of unintentional spiritual guidance. Can a secular object, by its inherent qualities, unexpectedly facilitate spiritual experiences or contribute to a sense of inner peace, even if it was not designed for that purpose? Or is it merely a projection of human desire for meaning onto a convenient blank canvas? You picture religious scholars and spiritual psychologists, their minds wrestling with the elusive nature of transcendence and the power of suggestion.
It's a universal aniconic symbol,
one might argue, passionately. No, it's just a blank piece of fabric that people are overthinking. Another would counter, perhaps with a dismissive wave of the hand. The answer, as always, remains delightfully inconclusive, as open to interpretation as the flag itself. A light joke floats into your mind. Why did the boring flag become a Zen master? Because it had achieved perfect non-attachment to visual interest. Another one, what's the boring flag's favorite spiritual practice? Just being. And finally, why did the boring flag never get distracted during meditation? Because there was nothing there to distract it. These little moments of amusement are like gentle blinks, keeping you lightly engaged as the narrative continues its serene flow. You appreciate its unwavering commitment to its core identity, its steadfast refusal to be anything other than its perfectly, unpretentiously simple self. You observe the flag's quiet presence in the development of mindfulness architecture and contemplative spaces. As modern life became increasingly hectic, architects and designers began to create environments specifically intended to foster calm and reflection. These spaces often featured minimalist aesthetics, muted color palettes, and a deliberate absence of complex visual stimuli. Our boring flag, or colors akin to its hue, became a natural fit for such environments, providing a visual anchor of serene simplicity. You see it as a design element in a quiet room, its understated presence inviting a deep sense of calm. A mainstream historical fact you absorb is the growing scientific research into the benefits of mindfulness and meditation, from reducing stress to improving cognitive function. Many studies highlight the importance of creating a conducive environment for these practices, often recommending visual simplicity, and a reduction of external distractions, our boring flag, by its inherent lack of visual noise, provided a perfectly compliant visual aid, allowing the mind to focus inward without being pulled away by stimulating imagery. It was the ultimate visual silence for the restless mind. The quirky tidbit from this era involves a peculiar spiritual retreat that advertised itself as offering total visual disarmament. Participants were encouraged to bring only items that were monochromatic and devoid of patterns, with the boring flag serving as the ultimate symbol of their commitment to this visual fast. The retreat reportedly led to profound experiences of clarity and heightened sensory perception, albeit experiences that were often described as surprisingly beige. You imagine the participants glowing with inner peace, their faces calm, yet perhaps a little bit bored. The scholarly debate here, rather humorously, delves into the concept of aesthetic asceticism. Is a deliberate reduction of visual stimulation, as embodied by the flag, a genuine path to spiritual growth? Or is it merely a form of self-imposed deprivation that mistakes emptiness for enlightenment? You picture psychologists of religion and mystics, their minds wrestling with the subtle interplay between external environment and internal experience. It purifies the visual cortex for higher contemplation, one might assert dramatically. No, it just makes people wish they brought a more interesting blanket. Another would counter, perhaps with a theatrical sigh. The truth, as always, remains as serenely ambiguous as the flag itself, fading gently into the background of spiritual inquiry. You find yourself smiling at another joke. Why did the boring flag achieve enlightenment? Because it realized that nothing truly mattered. What's the boring flag's favorite mantra? Just be. Just be. Just be. And finally, why did the boring flag always get chosen for the spiritual journey? Because it was already halfway to nowhere. These quiet moments of humor are like gentle sighs, punctuating the narrative with a sense of calm amusement. You appreciate the flag's unwavering commitment to its core identity, its steadfast refusal to be anything other than its perfectly, unpretentiously simple self. As you continue to drift, you sense a profound peace emanating from the story of this flag's unexpected role in the human quest for inner calm. It's a peace that comes from the quiet understanding that sometimes the path to profound insight is not through adding more, but through gently subtracting, not through grand displays, but through subtle invitations to stillness. It's the flag that reminds you to quiet your mind, to embrace the beauty of simplicity, and to allow yourself to surrender to the peaceful embrace of slumber, a slumber as spiritually serene and undisturbed as the flag itself. You now arrive at the culmination of our journey, a moment of profound reflection on the enduring legacy and future implications of the world's most boring flag. You observe a mainstream historical fact throughout history. Flags have not only reflected national identity, but have also shaped it, acting as powerful symbols that evolve with the aspirations and experiences of a people. Our boring flag, despite its initial lack of ambition, has ironically demonstrated a remarkable resilience, adapting to changing times not by altering itself, but by consistently remaining the same. A testament to its inherent, unassuming power. You picture it now not as a static object, but as a living concept, a quiet force of consistency in an ever-changing world. The quirky tidbit that emerges here is the surprising use of the boring flag as a symbol of digital resilience in discussions about future technological disruptions. Some theorists argue that in a world where deepfakes and manipulated images become commonplace, a flag so utterly simple and devoid of complex features would be virtually impossible to convincingly fake or distort. Its very blandness becomes its strongest form of authentication, a beacon of unimpeachable plainness in a sea of deceptive visual information. You imagine future digital forensics experts shaking their heads in frustration as they try to manipulate an image of the flag.
It's too uninteresting. The algorithms can't even get a grip on it. The scholarly debate often centers on the concept of post-symbolism. In a future where visual culture is increasingly fragmented and subjective, does a flag like ours, by its fundamental lack of specific meaning, represent the ultimate evolution of symbolism, a symbol that means everything and nothing, allowing for maximum individual interpretation? Or does it merely signal the exhaustion of symbolic representation, a surrender to a world devoid of shared meaning? You picture semioticians and cultural philosophers, their minds wrestling with the abstract concepts of meaning in a postmodern age. It's the ultimate blank slate for human consciousness? One might argue, passionately. No, it's just a blank slate, full stop. Another would counter, perhaps with a dramatic sigh of resignation. The answer, as always, remains delightfully inconclusive, as open to interpretation as the flag itself. A light joke floats into your mind. Why did the boring flag become an expert in cybersecurity? Because it was impossible to hack its visual integrity. Another one, what's the boring flag's favorite vision of the future? One where everything is exactly the same, but just a little bit quieter. And finally, why did the boring flag never get replaced? Because no one could ever agree on a more interesting alternative, and the original was just fine. These little moments of amusement are like gentle blinks, keeping you lightly engaged as the narrative reaches its serene conclusion. You appreciate its unwavering commitment to its core identity, its steadfast refusal to be anything other than its perfectly, unpretentiously simple self. You observe the flag's quiet role in hypothetical discussions about interstellar travel and the first contact with alien civilizations. When imagining universal symbols that could convey peace or mere existence to extraterrestrial beings, a simple, unadorned color field often emerges as the most universally understandable option. Our boring flag, by its very nature, embodies this principle, representing the ultimate in non-threatening, non-specific communication. It's the flag you'd send into deep space, hoping to convey we exist, and we're not trying to sell you anything. A mainstream historical fact you absorb is the growing philosophical discourse around sustainable design and the importance of creating objects that are timeless, durable, and resistant to fleeting trends. Our boring flag, by its inherent simplicity and lack of any fashionable elements, became a perfect example of sustainable symbolism. It doesn't need updates, doesn't require redesigns, and will never go out of style, because it was never in style to begin with. It was the ultimately eco-friendly flag, requiring no creative resources and producing no visual waste. The quirky tidbit from this era involves a peculiar art installation titled The Flag of Forever. It consisted of a single, perfectly rendered, boring flag displayed in a hermetically sealed, self-sustaining environment designed to last for millennia. The accompanying plaque simply read, "A testament to the enduring power of profound unremarkability. Future civilizations, if they discovered it, would likely be utterly baffled by its existence, yet perhaps deeply moved by its quiet, unwavering presence." You imagine alien archaeologists staring at it, their complex minds struggling to decipher the profound meaning of nothing. The scholarly debate here, rather humorously, delves into the ultimate legacy of boredom. Will the boring flag eventually be seen as a profound statement on human humility and the acceptance of limitations, a quiet rebellion against the relentless pursuit of excitement? Or will it remain forever simply, undeniably boring? You picture historians of the future, their minds wrestling with the ultimate meaning of this seemingly meaningless artifact. It was a monument to humanity's coming of age, a symbol of quiet wisdom, one might assert, dramatically. No, it was just a flag that was designed by a committee on a very tight budget. Another would counter, perhaps with a wary chuckle that echoes through the vast, empty halls of time. The truth, as always, remains as serenely ambiguous as the flag itself, fading gently into the annals of everlasting plainness.
you find yourself smiling at another joke. Why will the boring flag be the last symbol standing after the apocalypse? Because no one will ever bother to destroy it. What's the boring flag's favorite way to spend eternity? Just hanging around. And finally, why is the boring flag the hero of our story? Because it proved that even the most unremarkable things can have an extraordinary, enduring impact. These quiet moments of humor are like gentle sighs, bringing our long journey to a peaceful, unhurried close. You appreciate the flag's unwavering commitment to its core identity, its steadfast refusal to be anything other than its perfectly, unpretentiously simple self. As you conclude this winding narrative, you sense a profound peace emanating from the story of the world's most boring flag. It's a peace that comes from the quiet understanding that true strength can be found not in grandeur or spectacle, but in consistent, unwavering presence, in the acceptance of simplicity, and in the quiet dignity of simply being. It's the flag that reminds you that in a world constantly striving for more, sometimes the profoundest statement is made by embracing less. And in that final, soothing realization, you are invited to gently surrender to the peaceful embrace of slumber, a slumber as perfectly serene, as universally undisturbed, and as wonderfully, profoundly boring as the flag itself. Now, as the echoes of our long journey begin to fade, feel the gentle quiet settle around you. The stories, the debates, the subtle humor of the world's most boring flag, they all melt into a soft hum, like distant waves on a calm shore. Your mind, once actively engaged, now begins to slow, each thought a gentle whisper, a fleeting image. You are safe, enveloped in the quiet comfort of your space, the air around you soft and still. Let your breath become slow and even, a steady, rhythmic pattern, drawing you deeper, deeper into stillness. Imagine a vast, open field bathed in the soft glow of twilight. There are no sharp edges, no jarring colors, only gentle curves and soothing shades that blend seamlessly into the horizon. You are part of this landscape, a quiet presence within its peaceful embrace. All worries, all lingering thoughts, they are like tiny clouds drifting across this vast, empty sky, moving gently away, smaller and smaller, until they simply disappear. Your body feels heavy, comfortably sinking into the softness beneath you. Every muscle relaxing, every fiber loosening. The world outside is dim and distant, a faint murmur that cannot reach you here, in this quiet sanctuary of your own making. Allow your eyelids to grow heavy, to close softly, like curtains drawn against the last hints of light. There is nothing left to do, nowhere left to go, only this gentle descent into rest. Feel the deep, profound peace that comes from absolute simplicity, a peace as still and unwavering as the flag we've explored tonight. Just breathe, just be and drift.